Ends. I just pressed the Let's Go Live button, so let's wait for the stream to fire up all across the fruited plain of the internet before we go ahead and get started. It's a early morning edition of Watching the Watchers, and of course, today we are talking about George Allen Kelly. We've got the court docket schedule up right in front of us. You can see we've got an evidentiary hearing scheduled for this morning. Now, according to the court docket, they are telling us it's going to be a 9 to 12 p.m. ordeal. And I'm not so sure about that because it's very, very early in the case. And as we heard from the defense attorney, Brenna Larkin, she says, I need a whole lot more material before we can even contemplate having a preliminary hearing. And so I don't know if we talked about it here publicly or if this was just something we talked about on Locals. But, oftentimes these preliminary hearings at this stage in the case like this, they don't happen, right? This is a very complex case. And, they're going to need all sorts of evidence to present in order to sort of meet that probable cause threshold and then get them past this very preliminary stage of the case. And so in all likelihood, my thought was that this hearing wouldn't actually happen, that it would before court this morning, we would see that he was indicted from a grand jury, or there would be some sort of agreed upon continuance because it's just a lot to go through right now. I mean, you heard the defense attorney, Brenna Larkin, talking about it. We had the preliminary hearing that it was scheduled for, which was 2/22, and now they're calling this one an evidentiary hearing, which, different courts in Arizona name things differently, but we're still in the very early stages. So I think what this judge is doing is he called the original one a preliminary hearing. This is how some courts in Maricopa County do it. And remember, this is in Santa Cruz County. It's very far away. It's right on the border. And I was trying to think back through my career as an Arizona defense lawyer. Have I ever been there? And I don't think so. I think I've been to a bunch of the other courts east and west of it. So, and north of it, up in Tucson and, everything else on the I-10, but I don't know that I've ever actually appeared in this court. So anyways, the point is, so we've got a preliminary hearing. As you remember, last time it was only just, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes. It wasn't that long. They were just talking about motions to modify release conditions, modify the bond. The bond was, in fact, modified. And we'll take a quick look at that headline, which is here. No, that's from Fox News. I was trying to find something else. This one from Fox News. Here they tell us that the Arizona rancher, George Allen Kelly, posts a $1 million bond and was released from custody ahead of the next hearing, which was very good. And you remember, as we were listening through the hearing, we were kind of, annoyed the judge didn't reduce the bond. I thought that the defense attorney, Brenna Larkin, did a great job. And she made the point that she called a bunch of other bail bonds companies around Arizona. She did her homework, and they told her, well, no, in a situation like this, where it's this, and he's got no criminal history, and he's this person, and he's got all these ties to the community, and so on, they're saying that bail was normally set at $250,000, maybe $500,000 at the upper end. But this judge, and I thought that was fun because she was kind of calling out the judge without calling out the judge, saying, yours was a little high there, buddy boy. Maybe you should drop that down a bit. But he didn't. But he did turn it into a surety bond, so he went from cash to surety, which means he could then post up some collateral, use a bail bond company, and sort of get this whole thing situated, and he did. So Arizona rancher George Allen Kelly, who's facing murder charges and others in the shooting of a Mexican national on his border, he's also facing the aggravated assault charges. We'll take a look at those. He has been released from custody, Fox News Digital confirmed on Thursday. So Santa Cruz County Sheriff Office Deputy Gerard Castillo confirmed 73-year-old Kelly posted bond on Wednesday after appearing in court. Judge Emilio Velasquez upheld the $1 million bond, although converted it into a surety bond. And he also set the next hearing for Friday, despite the defense pleading for 30 to 60 days to allow it to go on so that the defense could build up some information, confer with experts, gather forensic ballistic evidence. They say that the authorities have not processed any of it. So the Christian crowdfunding site Give, Send, Go, they picked up the fundraising baton. There was a message on Thursday. It says, George and Wanda Kelly are so grateful for your support and donations, a post read on Thursday. Drop the charges against Arizona rancher George Kelly. When we come together and stand up for what is right, we make a difference. They still have a long road ahead of them. Please continue to support. God bless. Brenna Larkin, unable to comment, of course. She did an excellent job on Wednesday. She blasted prosecutors, yeah, for charging Kelly with first-degree premeditated murder. Rancher was also charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault for apparently, threatening the other people with his weapon, allegedly. All right, that's the scene. Actually, yeah, that was from the initial appearance. George Kelly sitting there. That was the initial appearance, and I think we reviewed that. That's when he did not have an attorney present with him, and so we'll see what happens here today. Now, I was trying to find a link, and we had a link problem last time. So if you are out there all across the fruited plain of the internet, and you happen to come across a link on this, let me know, because if we go over to the court docket, this is what they have for us. And we ran into this last time, so, who knows what's going to happen. But this is the official court docket as of this morning. Let's do a refresh just to make sure it's still there. There it is. And here we have the evidentiary hearing that they're linking us to. Brings us over to YouTube, but there's nothing there, So it's about 9 o'clock, and so we're waiting for the hearing to get going. So if you have anything else, anybody sees anything out there on any of the websites, let me know so that we can pull it up. I'm going to continue to look over here while we're poking around. I think Fox News Digital had it last time. Kay Tyler just dropped a link in the comments. Okay, so we're going to keep looking for it. I think is that a link, Kay Tyler? No, that's not what we're looking for right now, but thank you. We'll take a look at that later. Okay, so we're looking for a refresh. And locals went out for a minute, huh? Okay, so we're still here on the court website. Oh, here they are. Now they're live. Perfect. Exactly what we wanted. Great news. All right, so don't know that we have any audio yet. And we are going to have to move my fat head out of the way. Shrink that up a bit. We'll go in the upper. We'll stick down over here, but we'll just make it a little bit smaller because we have another prosecutor over there. We got 3 people now against 1 defense attorney. Typical. So we've got the county attorney here. We've got 2 other attorneys. This guy's got the black on the red. So this actually might be a little bit of a hearing because we have some people here. These look like investigators, so to speak. So we might actually be going forward with a hearing. And this is George Allen Kelly. Of course, he's in civilian clothes now. He's not in his prison outfit. Who is in the crowd behind him? I don't know if his wife is there. All right, so this might be the judge chiming in. Let me make sure that I don't have any audio problems. Okay, so I am testing to see if there's something wrong with my audio or if there's just no audio yet. So I just dropped the link in on locals. No audio yet, says Rowdy B. Okay, thank you. I got too many cords. So there's no audio on this proceeding yet. So we'll just hang tight until it comes down. Now, there was some other news, so we can take also a look. I think I grabbed a story here. This came out from Arizona Central. They call it a political powder keg. New details. Actually, here, let's do this. Pull this up here in case we see some activity. So Arizona Central was telling us that this is a political powder keg, not looking good. They say the prosecuting attorney in the case of the Nogales area rancher who's facing first-degree murder charges alleged on Wednesday that he shot him in the back as he ran for his life. Yeah, we actually read the response from the government, and the government response didn't make it look good, right? It honestly made Mr. Kelly sound like he made a bunch of admissions that were, slightly incriminating, more incriminating than maybe we had been let on to believe, but that's not unusual, right? I mean, it's typical that they're going to parse his statements out and try to make it look terrible. They are government prosecutors after all. So we have to be, we have to take this one step at a time. And there are people, concerned, well, what if he actually did shoot him? What if the ballistics come back and it is his gun? Well, all right, maybe it is, right? But he also has, I think, a pretty interesting self-defense and other arguments that might be very, very fruitful for him, given the fact that there's other evidence in this case that the Border Patrol also corroborated the idea that there were a group of armed men running around. We talked about that from the initial motion to modify the release conditions filed by Brenna Larkin. She said that there was other phone calls that were taking place, that other law enforcement authorities were trying to figure out who this sort of roving band of people were. And so, if they're approaching him on the property, now, again, if they're approaching him on the property and then he does shoot them and then he's sort of, dishonest about that, that doesn't bode well for his credibility in the court of law. But again, all of that is way, way down the road. I guess my point is there's steps here. And even if the ballistics come back and do match Kelly, he still has a whole slew of defense arguments that are still available. Sort of the current concern with this case is that they were maybe a little bit over eager with the charges based on at least Kelly's statements. And really the only thing that they have provided by way of evidence thus far has been the statements of the illegal immigrants who already broke the law, who already were on his property, already committing violations, maybe were involved in other criminalities. And in my opinion, are going to be highly persuadable and basically tell these prosecutors whatever they want them to hear, right? So both victims have come forward, according to this article, and provided their statements. There were at least 8 people in the group that Kelly encountered. Preliminary hearing on Friday was pushed to Friday morning, where witnesses will be present. Yeah, and it looks like they are actually present in the courtroom. So I'm wondering if they swapped the screen off because they're talking about something or what's going on. But yeah, it's looking like they're still just hanging out over there. Preliminary hearing, prosecutor must show there is probable cause. Okay, so this is what's going to be happening today. Prosecutor can present evidence and witnesses at the hearing before the judge decides to move the case towards a trial. And really, this just moves it over to the trial track, right? I still wouldn't expect a trial anytime soon on this. Hunley mentioned that the prosecution is not providing all the details in the case so as not to make them publicly known, which is very interesting. She said that, right? Well, Kelly entered the courtroom handcuffs, red prison jumpsuit, and a bulletproof vest. As he left the courtroom, Kelly looked at his wife, who was sitting in attendance. Heavy law enforcement, heavy security, $1 million bond. Says testimony is something that is bought and sold by drug traffickers, from Brenna Larkin. Same way that drugs and people are bought and sold. Larkin criticized the investigation for the case for charging Kelly before all the details emerged. And you remember that she actually brought up the Alec Baldwin saga too. She said that it's very interesting that that case took many, many months to investigate before they contemplated charges. And in this case, they charged the guy instantly. So it feels weird, the warning shot and all of it. K-Bean says, yeah, K-Bean's in the chat. I heard he was released on bond. Yeah, K-Bean, I think you probably just joined us. We just covered that one. He was in Fox News, had that for us. Judge converted it to a surety bond, and then he posted bond, and he was released. And we actually have that from the docket. You can see here, 223, they tell us, bond was posted in the amount of $1 million. And I think he had something like 170 acres of property, down there. So he, communicated with the bail bonds company and they got it sorted out. But this was the response that was filed by the prosecution. And this is where we saw, some interesting things that could be concerning, or they could just be statements that were sort of parsed out. And we're also identifying some new victims in the case. Yeah, and so maybe it will be useful to just take a look at the new amended complaint and get some of this stuff nice and situated. So we've got count 1, first-degree murder. Here, before we start clipping and stuff, while we're waiting for this hearing to start, we are going to check on some of my settings so we can turn that annoying sound off. Wherever it is. There it is. Got it. All right, so now we can turn that sound off as we're clipping. Okay, so as you can see, for George Allen Kelly, we've got now 3 charges. So first count is murder, which we already knew. That was the original one. And that involves GCB. Okay, so we'll go ahead and add that to the mind map. So count 1, it's murder. And we're trying to get our bearings straight on who all the witnesses are and who all of the deceased are. So we got GCB for the count 1. We're going to have count 2, which is going to be ag assault. And then we'll also have count 3, which will be ag assault. And we want to see what the different victims were for those. So let's grab those while we're waiting for all this to pop up. We'll start building out the mind map, and then we'll give access to our members, of course. But if we have count 2, so this is going to be RFG, which was my old initials. And so RFG, that was ag assault count 2. And then we'll have another count 3 for ag assault, and that's going to be DRR. Then, as you saw in the report from the defense for the prosecutors, there were a bunch of witnesses as well. Investigation is ongoing, and there are witnesses still being interviewed. There was a group of 8 people, and so the question is sort of who are all these 8 people? And then another question is, are they all going to come in and testify? So we've got DRR here, and we're still waiting for the court to get going. A little bit late today. No, there were more than 3 people there. So we have, these were the 3 people who were the victims of the crimes. So he's deceased, GCB is deceased. And then basically you can say that these other 2 people were shot at, right? Shot at or assaulted, or like sort of in the region. They weren't hit with a bullet, but they were aggravated. There was an assault that was aggravated that took place because they were put in reasonable apprehension of imminent harm and so on and so forth. So then there were other, we have an understanding from the prosecution response. Let's start to tease this out. The state further requests that there's no contact with the deceased victims' representatives. So, and also 2 victims of the ag assault, these 2. So these are going to be the deceased victims' representatives. So we'll put that under GCB. So they'll be involved in the case, right? JRYCDC. So if there's any plea deals or anything like that between George Allen Kelly, they'll be involved. Victims advocates will be communicating to them about that. They say many details of the investigations are being withheld. Yeah, we don't know anything. So we're all commenting in the blind on this. They should have told us a lot more. They have not. So maybe they do have a ton of evidence and they just haven't presented it yet. Maybe we get blindsided by it today at the hearing. Who knows? Furthermore, the court have all received disturbing communications threatening regarding the safety of the victims, which is also, they also could have been a little honest with us here and said, and George Kelly, right? George Allen Kelly. Why do we know that? Well, they brought him out in a bulletproof vest. So obviously some people are unhappy with him. And the courtroom was loaded up. So yeah, it's not just about threat of safety to the victims. It's also because people are threatening to kill him. Maybe there's more to that story as well. He's got 170 acres on the border there. And there's some murmuring that maybe he was stopping some sort of trafficking. We'll see. So they tell us that Kelly is charged with 1 count first-degree murder, 2 counts of ag assault involving 3 weapons, or 3 separate victims. They say on January 30th at 2:30, a group of 7 to 8 undocumented immigrants or illegal immigrants were traveling through the Keno Springs area from Mexico. All right, so let's go to maps and just take a quick look so we can sort of assemble this while we're waiting here. All right, so Keno Springs, just so we're aware, this is the border, right? This is Mexico here. United States is up here. Keno Springs is right here. It's literally right on the border, right? So we'll go ahead and add that so we have some good jurisdictional information. Put that in the mind map. As we still wait for the court. So we got Keno Springs. And there were a group of 7 to 8 people also out there who are making their way through. Okay, so that was the original complaint, and we can actually save this and add this to the mind map. Save that over here. Still waiting. So it's now 9:16, still no activity in the court. But we are getting our bearings straight. And so we'll do here the complaint. We'll add in the PDF so that we have that for posterity. Still nada. And all right. Well, we'll just keep on moving. See what else we can add to this. So we got the complaint saved. We'll also see what else. So contrary to Kelly's account, no one in the group was carrying weapons. That's very neat. So it's a total he said, she said game. Out of nowhere, they say, Kelly began to shoot at him with an AK-47, issued no warnings, made no requests. Okay, so again, I'm waiting for cameras. Are there ring cameras? What is going on here? He just started shooting at them. DRR was just one step behind Gabriel when he heard Gabriel call out in Spanish, "I'm hit," grab his chest and fall to the ground. Could only see the whites of his eyes. He felt like they were being hunted the way the shooter came out of the brush. They continue to run away back south towards Mexico. All right, so a group of 7 to 8 people, and we also know that this was taking place on January 30th around 2:30 p.m. the original. So that was the time of the shooting. Actually, it was even 7 to 8, 2:30 p.m. traveling north. And that's when it happened. Kelly shot at least 8 rounds at them. That's a good fact. Yeah, we want to save that. So they've got 8. What did they find bullet casings on the ground? Right? Because that sounds different than a warning shot. So why is this complaint not saving on my mind map? Being very difficult with me right now. All right, and we're still not hearing anything, right? Like this hearing is not going on, and we're just missing it. I mean, what the heck is going on here? They're still broadcasting over there, no? They removed the video. Gosh, they did it again. These sons of bees. What are they doing? Okay, they set up another feed, but they're still not live. Now we got the clerk in the house. So the camera changed a little bit. They're working on their technology over there. Okay. So nobody's seeing audio on this one, right, either? Just to make sure we're clear on this. There's no audio coming out of JP Clerk. Oh, there it goes. Scratch that. I heard a hammer. I think. We're getting excited. Didn't hear it. No, nothing else coming. Getting us all excited over here. All right. Well, we'll keep our eye on it again. Okay, so we've got the complaint. We're going to move these different charges down into the complaint. And we're also going to say some facts about what we're probably going to want to break this out into a shooting category. And we'll say, let's say about 8 rounds is the allegation. Okay, I heard something else. Slow morning over there. But it sounds like they're preparing for a big hearing, which is why it's taking so long. If it was just going to be kind of a quick in and out, they probably would have had a lot less people there and would have happened a little bit more quickly. Okay, so 8 rounds. So we have we have to ask ourselves, like, did they find, spent casings, and did they recover the other spent rounds? We don't have really any question about ballistics. I mean, I guess there's one bullet.
Good morning.
Hey, she's here. Good morning. I hear some activity over there. Okay, we also have 728. Illegal migrants made their way at about 2:30 p.m. We know where it is. Let's see what else we have. Shot 8 rounds at them. It must have been right around that time, right? Kelly provided conflicting information to the police. We've got RFG, DRR. Both of them are willing to testify. That's these two people. So that's not a surprise. Now you've got questions for them, right? You've got cross-examination questions for them. Why were you coming into the country illegally? Oh, did you know that that was his private property? Are you familiar with the United States law about trespassing? No, okay. And you start, okay, who was leading you here and who else were you with? And what were you guys wearing that day? And what did you bring with you and all of this stuff, man? And it turns into a big cross-examination. Like that is it's a curious one. So Kelly provided conflicting information. So they're going to say when the incident first began, instead of calling 911, he called Border Patrol. He said, I'm being shot at and I'm shooting back. And they've got that in a footnote. Official transcripts are pending. Quotes cited in this opposition are unofficial. Oh, that's nice. It's unofficial. Okay. So we want to be careful about this. I want to catalog this. He told Agent Morsel, I'm being shot at and I'm shooting back. That statement better match whatever the official transcript is. It better match that. It better be friggin' close to that or not. If it's not close, I'm not going to be happy about that. All right. So, all rise. All right. What happened to the sound?
Court is now in session. I'm presiding Judge Emilio Velasquez. I apologize for the delay. It appears that we're having difficulty with the streaming live, so I do apologize for that. And this is...
Can we see anything?
The preliminary hearing for case number 2023-041, State of Arizona versus George Allen Kelly. If I can have the states please identify themselves for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kim Hunley, present for the state. Also present is Matt Cannon from the office, as well as Jorge Ainza, the lead detective from the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you. So one of the things that I want to make clear too is please speak louder into the microphone, because last time it did seem like we had issues with that. And if I can have defense counsel identify herself and her client.
Good morning, Your Honor. Brenna Larkin on behalf of George Allen Kelly. He is present, seated to my right.
All right, very good. Thank you. So before we go ahead and proceed, it appears that there has been an amended complaint filed.
Yes, we just looked at it. Are they not going to show us the courtroom?
So it appears that the amended complaint is the change in count 1. At this time, Mr. Kelly is, the amended complaint has been filed is for second-degree murder.
Oh.
And Ms. Larkin, did you want to go ahead and waive the formal reading?
Yes, Your Honor, we'll enter not guilty plea.
Oh, they
Thank
amended it. This was
So there's
first.
several housekeeping things I need to address. The first one is going to be the disclosure of media. Mr. Kelly, like last time we talked about, there was no objection from either the state or from defense counsel to have the media present. But there has been a motion filed by the state to go ahead and not stream the witness when they are going to be testifying, which means that the video pool, the live stream, and any kind of audio would go ahead and have to be turned off.
Oh.
So is there any objection to that, Ms. Larkin?
Yes, object.
Your Honor, my understanding was that the state's motion was just requesting that video feed be off.
Thank you.
I think it's important just to keep these proceedings public. So
Yes.
I would ask that at least the audio remain working, and I'd leave it to the court's discretion as to whether video should be cut off or not.
Come on, Judge.
All right, so I'm going to read what the motion says, prohibiting audio or video recording, including YouTube streaming. So that means including YouTube. That means that if there's any kind of video pool that's on, that would be obviously the video recording of the testimony of the victim, and prohibiting disclosure of the identity of the victim and allowing the victim DRR to testify only using initials during the preliminary hearing, and allow the presentation to be the testimony for the presentation of the witness to also just be used with the initials. So that's what the
That's all
motion
fine.
was.
That's all fine.
So,
Just let it record,
I
though.
understand your objection, and go ahead.
Yes, and my objection then would just be to cutting off the testimony completely. I think it's important that these proceedings remain public, but I
Rotten
understand
prosecutors.
if the court wanted to cut off video to help protect the identity of these people. I'd leave that to the court's discretion, but I think their testimony should be heard.
Totally.
Thank you, Ms. Larkin. And a response from the state?
Your Honor, I find it interesting that Ms. Larkin is making that argument, given that yesterday her argument was that this has been in the media so much and that is undercutting the credibility of witnesses. So for the same reason, I would suggest that publishing this victim's testimony would present those same problems that Ms. Larkin argued yesterday.
How?
And my response, Your Honor, would be that it's not appropriate for the state to cherry pick what evidence gets heard by the public and what evidence does not get heard by the public. I agree that this evidence should have been kept private while an investigation was taking place in this case. However, that ship has sailed, Your Honor, and that ship sailed when the state filed first-degree murder charges against Mr. Kelly and brought this to the court. Once that ship sails, it sails. And either this is a public proceeding or it's not a public proceeding. I certainly don't believe in cherry picking what evidence can be heard or not heard by the public. Frankly, constitutionally, court proceedings are supposed to be open and available to the public.
Get it.
Your Honor, since it's my motion, if I could respond.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, I still believe that these victims can be, as I stated in my motion, at significant risk if their identities are disclosed. Someone may
Turn the cameras
recognize
off.
his voice. Someone may recognize something that he talks about with respect to describing himself and his work. And so those are my concerns with respect to the victim's testimony being present.
We have a right to see it. Presumption of openness.
This is the issue that the state is trying to protect in terms of for other witnesses coming forward.
Pathetic.
Well,
come on,
so
Judge.
at this time, I am going to go ahead and prohibit the video recording.
What
but
a
I will go ahead and allow the audio to be recorded.
Oh, okay, good. Okay,
All right.
audio's good.
And then
Okay,
the
good.
third issue.
And with respect to the victim's initials, Your Honor,
Yes, so the victim's initials, we'll just be using the victim's initials. We won't be using any full names. So
Okay, okay, that's good. That's good. That's good.
And Your
So
Honor,
we'll
I
get
don't
the
know
audio.
if you'd like to
We'll
have
get the audio.
him at the bench identify himself by name for the record, off the record, so that the court has that information, but and sealed that so that it's not public.
So one of the issues that we're going to have with that is that if we're going to have the audio recording and he goes ahead and discloses his full name, then obviously people will be hearing that,
Yeah,
right?
that's okay.
So it would have to be his initials that we can use when he's testifying. Or we can, I can state for everyone to go ahead and turn off their audio and video, their audio, and then we can just go ahead and have him state his name.
We usually do it as a bench conference, Your Honor, and we use the static feed to cover the testimony. I just wanted to make sure we have his legal name in the record, and I think we could cover it with the static testimony, put it in the court, have the court reporter record it, and then at least we'll have a record of it that the court can seal.
Very well, thank you.
All right, good news. So we'll get the audio, no video. We'll get the audio. That's very good. I was concerned he was going to say both are going off. I lost my.
And then the third motion that was filed was for the continuance of today's hearing, which I did deny. Did you want to go ahead and state anything on that, Ms. Larkin?
Yes, Your Honor, if I may. And Your Honor, I would renew that motion to continue for the reasons in the motion, and also for the reason that just today we were arraigned on an amended complaint That complaint was filed just yesterday. That complaint changes the charge from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. That's a significant change in the charge. Second-degree murder is, frankly, a more complicated theory of the case for both the state and the defense. It's in 13-1104 subsection A. Under subsection A, there are 3 different possible theories of second-degree murder. The state in its complaint only cited to the subsection A. The state did not cite either 1, 2, or 3, so the state's not indicating which theory of second-degree murder the state is proceeding under in this case. But having said that, Your Honor, I prepped this preliminary hearing on very short notice without sufficient time anyway to prepare for a first-degree murder cross-examination and defense. And just now today, the elements of that offense have changed drastically and completely. So I would renew the motion to continue for the reason that I have not had adequate time to prepare either for first-degree murder or for a brand new theory of the case, which is second-degree murder. I would also note, Your Honor, that disclosure has been very piecemeal, very ongoing. I received a lot of new disclosure from the state just yesterday afternoon, essentially between the hours of 3 and after 5 p.m., including for the very first time, disclosure of one of the witnesses whose first initial is D. That was an audio interview in Spanish, and I did not receive any supplement or anything that went with that interview. So the disclosure has been made very, very late in this case. I have not had time to review all of that disclosure and discuss all of that disclosure with Mr. Kelly. I have not had adequate time to prepare an adequate cross-examination of these alleged victims who are in this very late disclosure. And, Your Honor, I've been practicing in this court for going on 9 years now, and in my experience, it's very, very routine for this court to grant continuances. One of my colleagues was gracious enough to put together a list of some of the cases involving murder charges.
Wow.
Case number CF-22-194, for example, was continued for over 1 month before the defendant waived a preliminary hearing. CF-22-005 was continued at least 3 times over a period of 6 months.
Whew.
CF-22-042 was continued at least 4 times over a period of 4 months. CF-19-351, a first-degree murder case, was continued at least twice over the course of 3 months. And finally, CR-18-216 was continued 3 to 4 times in the preliminary hearing phase over a period of 10 months. So it's absolute standard practice for this court to grant these motions to continue, especially under these circumstances. And Mr. Kelly's case should not be treated any differently from how the court treats any other case that's in this court.
She does her
We have
homework.
very pressing reasons to ask for this continuance. We need to be fully prepared for a preliminary hearing with charges as serious as second-degree murder. And we're just asking that this court handle Mr. Kelly's case the way that this court handles all other cases and grant us that continuance so that we can adequately prepare. If the court were not to do that, it's our position that the court is denying the defense a substantial procedural right in this case. As I've said before, if the state wishes to have a very quick probable cause determination with no ability for us to present a defense, the state can take this case to a state grand jury. That's not how preliminary hearings are supposed to work. So I strongly urge the court to treat Mr. Kelly's case the way all these other cases are treated and grant us a continuance of at least 30 days to 60 days so that we can receive this disclosure and adequately prepare. Thank you.
That is Brenna Larkin. Okay, holy moly.
First of all, I'll start off with the second-degree murder issue, where Ms. Larkin started. Second-degree murder is actually a lesser included offense of first-degree murder. So if the court had heard the preliminary hearing on the first-degree murder charge, if the court did not find that the state had adequate probable cause, the court could have directed the state to file an amended complaint alleging second-degree murder and bind the matter over on that charge based on the evidence at the preliminary hearing pursuant to the rules. Second-degree murder is a unified offense. It's also called an alternative means offense. What that means, Your Honor, is that the state does not have to designate the subsection in which the theory of the case that is being presented. In fact, what happens at the jury is that the jury is presented with the definition of second-degree murder. They're presented with the three options under the statute.
Yeah, but we're not talking about a jury.
And the jurors don't even have to be unanimous
we're at a preliminary
with respect
hearing.
to their theory of second-degree murder.
You gave her the new
and
charge
in fact,
this morning.
when the court issues its ruling today, the rules limit the court's ability to either bind the defendant over as to the charge or not, and the court cannot even designate which subsection the court made that determination.
It's about preparation and due process. It's about procedure here today at this hearing,
with respect
not
to
about
the
the jury.
discovery and disclosure issue, Your Honor, there are many cases on point that neither rules nor requirements of fairness provide for a full discovery at preliminary hearing stage. That's State versus Canada, CANADY.
Nobody wants full discovery, but you gave her an interview last night.
But the site for that is 117 Arizona 572. That's a 1977 case, Your Honor.
Great.
So that rule has been around for a really long time.
What does that have to do with the
There's
evidence
another
you gave last night
provision
before
that
hearing?
says that the rules of criminal procedure do not provide for discovery prior to direct examination at preliminary hearing. So that's directly as to the issue Ms. Larkin just raised. That's State XRL Berger versus Justice Court of Northeast
She's going
Phoenix
to the law
Precinct,
as a crutch.
Maricopa County. And the site on that is 112 Arizona 24. That's also a 1975 case, Your Honor. That's black letter law that,
yeah, it's due process.
frankly, the purpose of this proceeding is just, the case law puts it this way. It's simply a course of procedure whereby possible abuse of power may be prevented. We're just here to make sure that the state has probable cause before the case gets bound over to Superior Court. This isn't about disclosure. This isn't about discovery. Ms. Larkin can cross-examine the witnesses when they're on the witness stand.
Totally dishonest.
There's no right to discovery prior to the direct examination.
No, but you have to have some discovery to do your job at a preliminary hearing, don't you?
Finally, Your Honor, with respect to a continuance, since the defendant isn't entitled to that sort of discovery, there is no need for a continuance in this matter, and the state would ask that we proceed. Ms. Larkin mentioned that the state could take this to grand jury. As the court's well aware, we do not have grand jury in Santa Cruz County. That is not a process we have available. It's certainly something that the state would like to have that ability.
They don't have grand juries. I didn't know that.
And it's certainly something we've been discussing with the court, but we just don't have the ability to do that. This case would be prime for a grand jury, frankly.
Yeah, it would be.
We just don't have the ability to do that. So for those reasons, Your Honor, again, I'd ask that the court
it's such a small county that they don't even have grand juries.
And Your Honor, my response, first of all, is that whether or not second-degree murder is a lesser included offense does not matter. Rule 5.4b of the Rules of Procedure say that the magistrate judge must not hold the defendant to answer for crimes different than those charged in the original complaint. So if the original complaint charged first-degree murder and there's no probable cause, the rules state that Your Honor cannot change the charge to something that's different from what's included in the original complaint. And Your Honor, we do have a right to make a proffer at a preliminary hearing. That is something that the defense is entitled to. And in order to make that proffer, the defense needs to do some investigation, and the defense is entitled to disclosure. This is the first time in my 9 years of practice here that I have ever heard the state argue that the defense is not entitled to any disclosure before a preliminary hearing. That's a completely unprecedented argument. Frankly, I'm amazed that the state is objecting to a motion to continue in this case, because routinely the state does not object so that disclosure issues can get ironed out. Clearly, the state is treating this case differently from how the state treats every other case that's on its docket. And Your Honor, we're just asking that you treat this case the same as every other case that comes before you. We very much need this continuance to prepare. These are serious charges, and that's all I have to say, Your Honor.
Excellent.
But this time I'm going to go ahead and deny the continuance. We're going to go ahead and proceed. So the state would like to go ahead and start with its opening statements.
Wow.
Your Honor, you basically have heard our opening statement. We're going to be short on time, so I'm going to be extremely brief. On January 30th, sometime between 2:30 and 6 p.m., the defendant shot an unarmed man in the back as he fled. There's at least 2 other individuals were with him at that time. They were also shot at by the defendant and fled for their lives. That's basically the presentation by the state today, Your Honor.
That's it. That's her opening statement.
We'll waive opening, Your Honor.
Thank you. And if the state can call its first witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Detective Ainsa.
Detective.
If you tell the truth and nothing but the truth shall help you God. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning, Detective. Could you please tell us your full name and your occupation?
Good morning. My name is Jorge Ainsa, Batch 136. I'm a detective with the Criminal Investigations Division with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office.
And you're speaking just a little bit fast, and the court reporter is going to have to keep up. So if you don't mind, I'll remind you if you get a little quick.
Yes, thank you.
Detective, can you just tell us very briefly your training and experience?
So I joined the Sheriff's Office back in 2006 as a detention officer. In 2008, I was assigned to attend the academy at Salesi, the Southern Arizona Law Enforcement Training Center, where I successfully graduated and became a certified peace officer in the state of Arizona.
And can you tell me, Detective, were you the lead detective on a homicide investigation involving George Allen Kelly?
Yes, ma'am.
And what date did the events for which that investigation occurred happen?
That occurred on January 30th of 2023.
Can you tell me the time frame in which the homicide is believed to have occurred?
Everything started approximately 2:30 that day.
And then what time did the Sheriff's Department arrive and locate the body?
That was late in the evening. I believe it was around 6 o'clock in the evening.
At some point during your investigation, did you respond to the location of the homicide?
Yes, I did.
And what was the location?
That was 100 Willow Cross Circle in Nogales, Arizona.
And is that in Santa Cruz County?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
Did your investigation lead you to interview a Border Patrol agent named Jeremy Morcell?
Yes, ma'am.
And is Agent Morcell willing and available to testify?
Yes, he is.
And can you tell me, when you interviewed Agent Morcell, can you tell us just initially how was he involved in the incident? Why did you interview him?
I briefly interviewed Agent Morcell during the preparation of a search warrant, and he was the one that received the call from Mr. Kelly on that day.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning then. Can you tell us what he told you first occurred that day? And first, let me back you up a second. Can you tell me how Agent Morcell, what his position is with the United States Border Patrol?
He's the ranch liaison for Border Patrol here in Santa Cruz.
And briefly, what does a ranch liaison do?
They basically go around Santa Cruz County and meet with ranchers and talk about issues regarding everyday activity through their ranches.
And can you tell us what Agent Morcell told you was the first thing that happened related to this incident?
Agent Morcell informed me that he received a call from Mr. Kelly and frantically telling him that he was being shot at.
Which we got that clip of
and
from
did he
motion.
say anything else with respect to shooting?
He said that he was being shot at and he's shooting back, and the call ended.
I didn't catch the second part of what you said.
He said that he was being shot at, and then Mr. Kelly was shooting back at these people, and the call ended.
So he claimed he was being shot at and that he was returning fire?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a Kelly statement. We'll keep track of those.
And then what did he say he was doing?
That's a defense.
At that point?
Being shot
That
at.
he was
self-defense.
After that, he made contact with Mr. Kelly again later on, that he was He went after the man on his property done on a wash on his property.
Okay. And what time, you said he talked to him again. Was that a second conversation?
Yes.
And what time was the first conversation?
It was like around 2:30.
And what time was the second conversation?
Like around 2:36.
And so during the second conversation, what is it that he said he told him on this occasion?
He said that he had lost visual of the subjects that were running probably south from his property towards the Buena Vista Ranch area.
And did the agent ask him at that time if he was being shot at?
Yes.
And how did he respond?
He said that he wasn't sure he was being shot at.
What did he say he heard?
He said that he heard what he believed to be shots and he was being shot at, but then he changed his conversation. He didn't know exactly who he was being shot at.
Did he say that he heard a gunshot in his direction?
Yes.
And did he tell him what he saw when he heard that gunshot that he claimed was in his direction, that he thought was in his direction?
He said that he saw his horse running across his property.
And what did he say he was doing while he talked on the phone with respect to the horse?
He was checking on his horse to make sure the horse didn't get hit.
And what did he say about the horse?
He said that the horse didn't believe to have been hit or struck.
So he looked at it, he didn't think the horse had been hit?
Yes.
So it sounds like there's bullets flying all over the place, according to him.
What did he say with respect to whether the individuals were armed during this conversation?
Agent Marcel told me that Mr. Kelly told him that he probably saw 5 men wearing all camel clothing with backpacks and they were armed.
Was that during this conversation or a different conversation?
That was during the first initial conversation, too.
Okay. And then during the second conversation, what did he say with respect to whether he could tell whether there were firearms?
Mr. Kelly informed Agent Marcel that he wasn't sure because they were too far away to determine if they're actually armed or not.
So the first time he says they're armed, the second time he says they're too far away to tell.
That's correct, ma'am.
And what did Agent Marcel tell you that he did after the first and second calls?
He made contact with his radio and advised him of the situation that Mr. Kelly had reported.
And did he indicate who the control at the Border Patrol had notified regarding the call?
I believe it was Tercy, who was operating a camera. Radio, actually.
But what did Border Patrol do? Did they send a response? Did they send other units?
Yes, they did.
Who did they send?
They sent 2 agents along. Then after that, they called the sheriff's office.
So they sent their own agents and contacted the sheriff's department?
Yes.
Did Agent Marcel tell you what the next thing was, that the next time that he had a conversation with Mr. Kelly?
Yes, he did.
And what time was the third conversation with Mr. Kelly?
That was, I believe, like around 5:30 or 4:30, I believe.
Does 4:23 sound correct?
Yes, ma'am.
From your interview?
Approximate.
And when Mr. Kelly called
Just an
on
hour
this,
off, not a big deal.
during this third conversation, what were his spirits and what did he call about?
Said Agent Marcel informed me that Mr. Kelly called him just to thank him for a quick response, not only the Border Patrol, but the Sheriff's Office response.
And during this conversation, what did he tell Agent Kelly with respect to where he and his wife were when this incident started?
They were in their kitchen, in their home.
And what did he say he heard at that point?
That he had heard a shot.
A shot.
And what did he say he did when he heard the shot?
So from
he actually told his wife to be quiet while he heard the shot.
Shots to a shot.
Was that from a different interview, or is that from what Agent Kelly told you?
That's from it's Agent Marcel.
Or Agent Marcel, I'm sorry.
It's from what he told me.
Okay. And then when he told her to be quiet, what did he do?
He went outside.
And what did he observe outside?
That's when he said he observed those approximately 5 men carrying backpacks and with what he believed to be rifles.
At this point, did he give a different description of how many males? Do you remember?
Yes, he said he was seeing at least 10 to 15.
And did he say whether those 10 to 15 individuals had weapons or not?
He couldn't tell.
George Kelly's writing. He's a lefty.
Would it
Shout
refresh
out.
your recollection if you looked at your supplement regarding this?
So some statements changed, went from about five to 8, at different statements of men armed in camos, then to 10 to 15. Showing the defense a copy of the report. That's fine. I don't need to look at it. Look at that big stack of paper there, whatever that was, big chunk of documents. So they've got a lot of discovery. The defense hasn't seen any of it. Somebody's entering the courtroom. Don't know who that is. And I don't know whose camera that is.
Did you take a look at supplement 33 and see if that refreshes your recollection?
Also, by the way, since this is a preliminary hearing, we have lower standards, which is why we have basically hearsay going on. We don't have
yes.
Agent Morsell on the stand because this is a preliminary hearing. It's not a full trial. So we've got lower standards there where a lot of the stuff is acceptable. It's supposed to be just
the final
enough,
tab, FF.
just enough to get the probable cause. So it's not like a full-blown trial. It's like a trial with a much lower standards, which is why we don't actually have to have, we don't actually have to have, we got the buffer on YouTube. The actual agent. Come on, YouTube. Hopefully their streams are okay. Hopefully my streams are okay. What's going on? Don't do this to us. Work with us here. Let's try a refresh. Did they end it? Uh-oh. What happened? Did they end it?
Yes.
Their tubes went out, man. Streamed 1 minute ago. The tubes. I feel it, man. I feel the tubes, man. I feel it. We have our own tube problems here. Darn it. All right. Who had that other camera in the courtroom? Let's dig it out. Let's dig out the other link. They shut it down, man. All right. We got to find another link here. There was another camera in the courtroom. Is anybody else covering it? Sheesh Louise. Court camera. Maybe they're going to fire it back up. Fox had it last time. Looking for it right now. If anybody on the YouTubes or anybody has a link, we're going to do a refresh and see if they fired it back up. But no, it's still down. Ugh! All right, let's see if any of the other streams have it. How about Fox News? They had it last time, I think. But I don't see anything now. We'll wait. Maybe the stream will come back. We'll do a refresh. The tubes, man, I understand the internets can be difficult. But we did have some good information coming out. Yeah, let's see here. Still nada. Bummer. Well, they should have just turned the video off. I mean, but they weren't even showing us the video, right? I mean, they were actually very curious. So I don't think it was an intentional shutoff, I guess is my point. We were just getting started, man. All right, and we're just going to keep looking for it. Let's see what Fox News Digital has for us. I don't know that. It's just dead air. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing here. And I don't see any other feeds. Ugh, bummer. All right, well, I'm sure he'll be back, so we'll just hang out for a bit and just keep chatting. Now, we made some good notes as they were typing away. I was clipping and adding some content to our mind map here. And so we did have some notes from the lead detective. I didn't capture his picture, but still trying to fill in the blanks a little bit. We want to know who the lead sheriff is. That guy, still didn't get his name. We got Kim Hunley, Santa Cruz County Attorney. We had some more information that came out from his testimony. And so 2008, he was in the academy. He said that he was being shot at and then shooting back. We saw that was the first phone call at 2:30. The locals keeps erroring out for some reason. I don't know why locals keeps erroring out. Yeah, so we had here, we had 2:36 p.m. change, not being shot at. He's not being shot at, or not sure being shot at was the language. Then we had 4:23, horse had been shot at. He went to go check out the horse. All right, like they're making all these like big statements, like these are a change of statements. Like he went from shots to a shot, and from 5 to 10, or from 8 to 15. Like I understand all of that, but the bigger picture, if you zoom out on this, it sounds like this guy was sort of in a war zone. You know, like there were bullets flying all over the place. He's checking on his horses. He sees groups of men wandering around on his property. Does Rom know he's been gone for the last 3 minutes? Well, we should be back here. Yeah, we should be okay now. Yeah, somebody's wondering if probably, I'm sure the court is scrambling to get it back on. Probably. So we'll just keep refreshing it, but don't see anything there. I guess my point is, if you zoom out on it, you know, it sounds like he's in a war zone. So, okay, so what if it is shot to shots, or his language is inartful at times? You know, he just was in sort of a little battle, and maybe there are some incongruities in what he said. We had Brenna Larkin, Jeremy Morsell. Of course, we don't know what he looks like or where he's at. But if this proceeds to trial, and I'm sure the judge is going to just stamp this preliminary hearing. So far, it's basically been like that. So I'm sure it'll get bound over. But we still would like to see it. We've still got nothing. All right, well. Yeah, Bonnie says he was in panic mode, right? He was, right? You can imagine being that in that manner, in that sort of mindset when this is all going on around you. All right, well, let's see what else the chat has to say. So we'll over on YouTube, I see Playing Hookies in the house. We got K Beans in the house. Hey, thanks, K Bean. Thanks for sending in some of the chats and for asking some questions so we have less dead air here while we wait for the stream to come back. K Bean says, thanks for this great coverage, Rob. Thank you, K Bean. It's kind of fun going live. It would be nice. It would be a lot more fun if we had a trial to watch, but maybe they're working on it. We had a good question. Yeah, 2 of them came in. One from K Bean. The chat would like to know what a continuance means, and from K Bean, thank you, K Bean. And Les Celavy says, Rob, can you explain what a continuance means? Yeah. So basically, a continuance, the way that I would think about it is you're sort of picking up a court proceeding and you're just moving it into the future. You're just extending it. Think of it just like another word would be just like an extension. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than like just rescheduling like a lunch. You know, you reschedule a lunch. Oh, I can't make it Friday. I'm busy. Oh, why are you busy? Well, I've got, this going on. Well, that's not really a good reason for you to reschedule lunch with me. I was planning on this reason, okay? It's not a good reason. Okay, that is a good reason. So we can reschedule the lunch. We'll reschedule it in 30 days, right? And that's kind of how we deal with it in the real world. But if you actually do have that continuance, you might have some problems with your friendship or something. But it really doesn't have any legal consequences. In the law, especially in a criminal case, you do have the right to a speedy trial, right? And this is where this continuance issue does come into play. So think about it like a chess game, kind of. In a chess game, you see people slamming the timers and the stopwatches on the side, right? You each get a certain amount of time. If you run out of time, you lose the game. You got to move or you lose the game. That's why you move, hit the thing, stops your clock from counting. Same type of thing happens in criminal law. Like the government has a clock, and every time that they ask for a continuance, every time that they push it out, it counts against their clock, right? You've got a right to a speedy trial. So if they extend it and extend it and extend it, then that's eating against their clock, and it's eating into your right to a speedy trial. So when the defense asks for a continuance, oftentimes the defense will say, we'll take that other 60 days, or in this case, Brenna Larkin's asking for those 30 days. They'll ask whether the defense waives time. Okay, and so that's sort of saying, we will just waive that time. We're going to waive that. It's not going to count against the government. So you're sort of saying, yes, I have a right to a speedy trial, but I'm not going to enforce it. I'm not going to exercise it too aggressively because I am the person requesting the continuance, and I want the benefit that's going to be associated with that continuance. So here, right, Brenna's saying, look, yeah, I'll ask for 30 days or 60 days so I can go do my due diligence and prepare my case. However, there is the speedy trial prohibitions and rules around that, but we're going to be waiving that so this can all move forward and we can get what we want. Now, in this case, the government obviously didn't want the continuance. They wanted it to move forward. I was a little bit taken aback. I didn't realize they didn't have grand jury proceedings down there, which makes it kind of like this is the only option, I guess. So that's why they're moving forward with it. I'm going to imagine because of that, the judge is just going to rubber stamp it. Now, I would love to have the hearing up and alive, but we just don't see any feeds. There's somebody in the courtroom, dang it. Maybe they're not going to get it back up. I can tell you this, though. As soon as we stop the stream, they'll turn the feed back up. Do you know what I'm saying? Obviously, that would be what happens. Here's the chat. If you're on the YouTube chat, that should show up there. Call the court. I'm sure somebody could call the court, but I don't want everybody calling the court. I'm not encouraging you to call the court. I'm sure they're getting plenty of phone calls trying to figure it out. We'll just hang tight. We'll just keep trying it. This is the mind map, and we'll just hit the refresh button over here. If you see any other feeds or any other links, let me know, but we're kind of just hanging out. Terry B says, you are amazing. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate you for sending that in and for supporting the work that we're doing here this morning. Censoring a trial, what are they afraid of? Good question. Base 10 says, this is crazy. Here, Samantha, talking about cell phones. we'll leave that one. I can't talk about cell phones because then the whole show will be about cell phones, you know. And honestly, my friends, the rest of the news today is pretty slow, you know, so we could always take a look at what else is going on out there while we're just waiting. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Biden schedule. Let's see what Joe Biden's up to today while we're just hanging out here. Does he have anything going on? Oh, here's what he's doing. Right here, the president receives the daily briefing, 9 a.m. He's meeting with G7 leaders and Zelensky. Great. So they're going to have a virtual meeting to continue to talk about money. Probably going to give him another credit card number since the others have melted down. In town pool call time, out of town pool call time. He's going back over to Delaware for the weekend. Yeah, so he's going to be there tonight. That's great. So that's the president. We also have Congress is pretty light today. Is there anything going on over on C-SPAN? Blinken, UN Secretary Council. Let's see what's live right now. All right, so Blinken's talking right now. Maybe we can put this on while we're waiting. See what he's talking about.
Conflict has negatively impacted the world trade
Mozambique
and supply chains. It has brought economic damage with
United
global
Nations Security Council meeting
affecting transportation costs and virtually.
Yeah, that's not Anthony
Blinken,
Blinken, I don't think. Pretty sure that's not him.
The socio-economic impact on developing countries, especially Africa, has been grave.
Not on the
The
court.
IMF
Crazy.
has found that while the African continent was slowly rising from the COVID pandemic,
Does this defense attorney know that they are not broadcasting this feed? This is annoying.
Now threatening this recovery. Many of our countries are vulnerable due to the higher energy and food prices, reduced tourism, and potentially difficult accessing international capital markets. From an African perspective, we are all too familiar with the devastating effects of conflicts. We know that wars only result in the suffering of people, and it is our collective duty, the duty of the international community as a whole, to work towards resolving conflict through peaceful and negotiated solutions. We need to...
All right, we can't keep listening to that. See what else we had. U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission holds a hearing on China's education policies. See what this one has for us.
Sure.
More China, getting ready for World War III. See what they're talking about here.
Difficulties, challenges, deficits in terms of innovation, but if there are certain areas of excellence or focus that are targeted, it can result in
Commissioner Shriver.
Kinds of innovation that have direct application in the military space and the like, and I think that's a very useful way to think about this. But I also sensed in your statement, your assessment of the trajectory, China can do this with all these challenges and problems that it has, as Professor Ding described, and the trajectory they're on, if I heard you correctly, it should be of great concern to the United States that we're not doing things to thwart this targeted innovation, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how you described it. Am I capturing your statement correctly? And if so, what would the key things be in your mind in terms of dealing with military-civil fusion, thwarting that innovation model? Is it the talent program?
There's still nothing on this website. This is crazy.
So I think I'm not as maybe pessimistic as Dr. Ding, but I think it's looking at what are those key pieces that China is putting in place that is not necessarily going to drive today's industries, but those industries of the future. And so that really gets at some of those big science facilities. It's looking at capacity building. And that, those investments are something that takes time to play out. And because I think a lot of the things that we're talking about today, where China has been successful, are the results of policies that they've put in place 10, 20 years ago, especially the talent programs. And that's not to say they're 20 feet tall. That's never what I'm saying, or that we need to contain. It's a question of, especially in some of these new industries that are going to drive, the future, things that we can't even think about right now, that, the focus should be like, do we want some of these new technologies developed with our values or with China's? And do we want them to control some of these areas? And especially, when we talk a lot about AI, we talk about biotechnology, but in thinking through, okay, the race from genotype to phenotype, or what genes do, and how that can be used for good.
All right, I'm not sure we're getting the feedback, my friends.
How do we deal with the changing climate and other those areas? But then, of course, the flip side is how some of those technologies can be used in the hands of an authoritarian government that in ways that we, aren't consistent with our values. And so it's really kind of thinking through, what are those investments? And it's just not the amount of money, but thinking strategically about, what are those tools of discovery? How do we continue to grow? Because if we just run in place, China's not running in place. And so really kind of thinking through, how do we foster the technology or the talent? And that's not just at the PhD level. And I was very taken with some of the earlier comments, because what does it mean to have a technically proficient workforce? And that's not just PhDs. That's coming back to the
all right, so I still don't think that we're getting anything. I'm going to give them a call real fast.
You don't need
and just see if there's even anybody answering. 1 second.
But you do need a level of technical proficiency, and it's thinking through, okay, how do we build that resiliency into our own system, as well as thinking through what are those technology areas that we don't want to be dependent.
Commissioner Wessel.
Thank you. I probably have an hour of questions, which I will squeeze into a short time. This is very helpful. And Ms. Puglisi, good to see you again. Thank you for your prior service. You still have a lot of fans in your former places you served, so I share their good wishes. I want to challenge a bit of this, and Mr. Ding, my first visits to China were in the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s. And you talk about diffusion. I think of this as adaptation and system integration. At that time, I visited Beijing Jeep, where...
all right, so I called. They answered, and they are not going to be putting the feedback up. So they said the feed will be available after the hearing is over. They will publish it when it's done, is what they said. They said they had some technical difficulties, so they're not going to restart the stream, but it will be back after it's over, which means we're not going to be able to cover it live. And so once it is published, we'll revisit it. It's on YouTube, but it keeps looping now, is what Bonnie said. Let me check again. I just talked to the clerk, and he said no. He said, we're having technical problems. Let's see if they're live again. Yeah, here it's still on there. Like, you can see the first 37 minutes of it. It ended, and I don't see anything else. I checked all of the other courtrooms. This is only courtroom 3. There's other courtrooms. I checked all the other courtrooms too, and there's nothing in there. So it sounds like they're just going to put it back up and when it's done, which is not really, I'm not real happy about that. And I think the defense attorney's probably not going to be real happy about that either, right? This was something that she made an argument about this today, saying that she wanted it to be public. She wanted it to be going in real time. Transparency is super important. We're in the middle of something and they cut it out and we can't see it. I'm not implying anything nefarious is going on down there, but the defense attorney, Brenna Larkin, made a very clear argument here that this should be public, this should be transparent, this should be accessible, and the fact that we can't see it is frustrating. I'm not blaming anybody at the court. I know that, I understand more than anybody how much these tubes can be difficult. We've had our own tube difficulties here in the past, but it is frustrating, and right, I think this is a very important part of this, which is the transparency. We heard arguments from the government prosecutor here today. She didn't want any of this broadcast at all, right? That was her argument. And guess what? It's not being broadcast now for whatever reason. So seems very, very convenient. Again, I'm not implying any malfeasance or any nefariousness from the court or from the judge or from the staff. I think they're all doing a great job, including Brenna Larkin. But it is interesting that the prosecution doesn't want any of this broadcast, and then suddenly it's not broadcast. And so it'll be back up here, hopefully later tonight, and we'll be able to go through it. We'll probably just come back for the show tonight and finish it up, hopefully, once it is published. But anyways, we'll see. Yeah, and of course, a lot of this also maybe is not being covered because of Murdaugh. Murdaugh's going on right now, and everybody's very focused on that. So, all right, my friends. Well, we will plan on coming back here later tonight to pick back up where we left off, provided that it is up. If it's not up, then we may reconsider. But the point is, we'll come back tonight and revisit unless something changes. So we'll leave it right there. Thanks for joining us. Well, we had a little time together to dive into this. We will end it on YouTube and the other platforms. We'll continue to stream here for a little bit longer for our members only. We'll just check in and say hello and good morning to our members only. So if you're a YouTube member or a Locals member, we're going to hang out for a little bit. And you got to join our Telegram. So join our Telegram, our private Telegram group. If you're a YouTube member, you can find the link in the community post for members only. And we'll continue to hang out for a little bit, hit some of the other headlines. It's kind of a slow news day, so I'm not real sure we'll come back and do a full show tonight. We'll see. But we're going to hang out here for the little bit with the rest of the team, rest of the crew, rest of the Locals, watchers, and Telegram community. And so that, my friends, will be it for us. If you'd like to join us, head over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com or join us on YouTube. And have yourselves a beautiful Friday, my friends. I'll see you all on the next one. Actually, wait a minute. We had some super chats that came in here. We did have. Did we get all the super chats? People are saying it's up. Hang on a minute. It is up. Holy moly. I told you. As soon as we were going to leave, they just fired it back up. Oh my gosh. Can you believe this? Can you believe this? Almost happened. Gosh. Hey, it's Leaf Blower Guy. Hey, you guys want to say hi to Leaf Blower Guy? He's right outside. Can you hear him? I can see him right here. Hello, Leaf Blower Guy. He's right there. He's right there. All right, we're back. Now let's get some audio. We almost ended the stream, man. Hilarious. Whew, we got lucky. It's the feds. Yeah, maybe it was the call. Maybe the phone call. They're like, oh, the stream's down? Uh-oh. They figured it out. They turned it back on. Good. No, I'm sure they were working on it. But let's see. We're back in business. Good news. Good. I was ready to do some mind mapping.
During the autopsy of Mr. Quinn?
Well, we missed a lot.
And do you recognize the Exhibit 8 that I just provided to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us what those two photographs are?
These are the photographs of Mr. Gabriel on the table during the autopsy.
And I see that there's one labeled Bates 188 on the bottom, with the Bates number 188 on the bottom. And can you tell me what that photograph depicts?
This is Mr. Butimea on the autopsy table facing up and with the exit wound on his left upper chest area.
And do you have also a photograph Bates number 164?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does that photograph depict?
This is, again, Mr. Butimea on the autopsy table with the entry wound to his rib cage, right side.
And is that on his back?
It's on his lower back by the rib cage.
Back here.
Your Honor, move for admission of State's Exhibit 8.
Okay, so autopsy photos are coming in.
Could you pass that to the court, please?
We got some autopsy photos. We missed a bunch, right? We missed like the good parts.
And did you,
He's
along with
dead.
other detectives, serve search warrants on the residence at 100 Willow Cross Circle in Nogales?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you serve that on the residence, other buildings on the property, and the vehicles?
Yes, ma'am.
During your search warrant, were you initially assisted by canine from ATF?
Yes.
When the canine was there, was the canine able to recover anything in the backyard Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
What did the canine locate?
The canine is it's a canine that's by ATF, which is specialized in explosives, ammunition. She was able to locate a casing on the back porch.
And could you tell us about the casing?
It was a Spain casing, Wolf brand, 7.62 by 39 millimeter Spain casing, gray in color.
And is that a round that can be used in an AK-47?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and there was one round? Because I thought they said they shot 8 times.
Warrant, did you find additional casings?
That's what I want to know.
Yes, we did.
And how many additional casings did you locate?
We found 8.
So.
And how did you locate those casings?
With the assistance of one of our detectives, we walked the property.
And did you also use metal detectors?
The detective used a metal detector.
Okay, so 8 casings.
When you found those 8 casings and the one casing, let's start with the one casing the ATF dog found. Where was that in relation to the property?
It was right outside the porch, right outside the living room area.
And the living room and the porch area, is that to the front or the back of the residence?
It was the back of the residence.
And is the back of the residence near or away from where Mr. Kelly claimed the individuals were running?
It's a long distance.
I didn't ask that question well. So I'm trying to figure out how the property is positioned with respect to where you located the body and where Mr. Kelly said the individuals were running.
We found the casings, and we found the body just south.
So is there a house in between?
There is a gazebo.
There's a small gazebo in between, but the house this is the back of the house with relation to the back of the house is positioned how with respect to where the body was located?
The back porch just faces south of the body. So it's right behind the house. South.
So the body's located behind the house from the back of the house?
Yes, okay. Correct.
And then, so where you located the initial casing, is that, was that casing in a location that would be consistent with a shot being fired toward the victim?
Yes, towards the body.
And the 8 other casings you found, were they also located in that same location?
Yes.
During the search, did you also find an AK-47?
Yes, we did.
And did that AK-47 match a description of the weapon provided by the officers who responded and saw Mr. Kelly with the weapon?
Yes, it matched.
During that search, did you also find numerous rounds of ammunition matching those casings that you located outside the back patio in the back of the house?
I did locate multiple live ammunition matching the ones from outside.
Did you also recover a number of other weapons?
Yes, we did.
That's not illegal. You're allowed to have weapons. That's okay. Now, there's a difference here. He said I fired a warning shot, and now we found 8 casings. So we've got questions about whether those casings are related to the warning shot. We have a situation where we've got 1 casing, and then we've got 8 others that they found. So maybe there is a difference in time. Maybe he's firing off other rounds for other reasons. The 1 was the warning shot. So we're asking about really the chronology of the rounds. She's showing the defense the document marked as exhibit whatever. Do you recognize this? Any objections? Says, I don't have any problems with that as long as you do something. Don't ask about that thing. She says, I'm not going to ask about the thing. Okay. Gives him the document. You recognize this? And hopefully...
Take a look at those photographs and see if you recognize them.
And just for the record, Your Honor, I don't object to the detective looking at those photographs. Ms. Hunley says that she has disclosed those to me. I don't have these photographs, and I've been through the photographs that have been disclosed multiple times. I just want to make a record of that.
No disclosure.
Go ahead and proceed, Ms. Hunt.
And Your Honor, just for the record, I've shown them to Ms. Larkin prior to showing them to the witness.
Okay, the record's clear. Thank you, everybody. These two people don't like each other at all. She does not like her at all. You can tell because she keeps
Do you
looking at her
recognize those?
Yes, ma'am.
like this.
Do those depict the casings and the weapon we just discussed?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, move for admission of State's Exhibit 6.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
No further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Larkin?
Just to be clear, did you go out to the scene when the body was still there, or did you go out afterwards to execute these search warrants?
I executed the first search, ma'am. I did go out there, but I didn't go out to where the body was.
Okay. And so the first search warrant that you did, was that executed at nighttime?
It was a nighttime warrant.
Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that you described from Agent Morcell. You spoke with Agent Morcell about his involvement in this case, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he says that he initially gets a phone call from Mr. Kelly at around 1:30 while Mr. Kelly was eating lunch.
Approximately 1:32.
That's the first phone call?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that phone call, Mr. Kelly indicates he's being shot at and he might have to shoot back. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So according to Agent Morcell, that's the first contact that Mr. Kelly has with law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that first contact, Mr. Kelly states that he's firing shots?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in fact, immediately, Mr. Kelly reports to law enforcement that he fires shots, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the second call happens shortly after that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he's just saying that he saw these people and they're armed and that sort of thing. He's telling Agent Morcell.
Yes, ma'am.
And then in the third call, he's saying, this is after everybody's left the property, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he's telling Agent Morcell essentially, thank you for responding so quickly, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And this time he's saying, gosh, maybe there were 10, 15 people, they have rifles, I don't know, something along those lines.
That's correct, ma'am.
And does Agent Morcell describe that as Mr. Kelly changing his story?
Yes.
Okay. So that's Agent Morcell's interpretation of what Mr. Kelly says to him, right?
That's correct.
And Mr. Kelly does say that there are folks who are armed with rifles, right?
That's correct.
And you don't know what his demeanor was like when he's speaking with Agent Morcell, is that right?
That's correct.
And these phone calls with Agent Morcell, those are not recorded, is that right?
I don't know how their government phones work, Ms. Larkin. I don't know if they record their, I don't know.
Okay. So they might or might not be recorded?
That's correct.
Okay. You haven't heard any recording of a phone call with Agent Morcell, is that right?
I just heard the voicemail left by Mr. Kelly to Agent Morcell's work cell phone.
So Mr. Kelly left a voicemail to Agent Morcell?
Yes.
Was that later on after Mr. Kelly had discovered the body?
Yes.
And that voicemail was essentially, I can't say more over the phone, but this is bad, send someone out here?
Yes.
Something along those lines?
Yes.
Okay. And did Agent Morcell tell you what he was doing when he got each of these phone calls?
A couple of phone calls he was on duty. The other phone calls he was off duty in Green Valley with his family at the gym.
Okay. So that first phone call, the one that happens about 1:30-ish, ballparking it, does he tell you what he's doing when he receives that phone call?
He was at his office finishing up some admin duties.
Okay. And then the second phone call, Agent Morcell calls Mr. Kelly back. Is that right?
Yes.
And does Agent Morcell tell you what he's doing when he calls Mr. Kelly back?
I think he was going off duty. He was preparing his stuff to leave his workplace.
So he's getting ready to leave
Yes.
work at that
Yes.
point? Okay. And I think it's that second call where Agent Morcell is claiming that Mr. Kelly tells him they're too far away to tell if they're armed. Is that right?
Yes.
And Agent Morcell is claiming that he asked Mr. Kelly, are they armed, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Kelly responds by saying, they're too far away to tell.
Yes.
Okay. And then does Agent Morcell do anything with that information?
He goes down and informs his immediate supervisor of everything that's going on.
Okay. Does Agent Morcell reach out to Agent Tercy?
That's during the initial, when Mr. Kelly calls about the shots being fired, just to radio over the radio.
So tell me about Agent Tercy's involvement. What was going on between Agent Tercy and Agent Morcell?
I have not interviewed Agent Tercy. This is what Mr. Morcell, Agent Morcell told me that's how he relayed the information because of the repeater. It was easier to inform what was going on to Agent Tercy.
So Tercy's a new
my
player.
Understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that Agent Morcell gets this information, and then he calls Agent Tercy, who's essentially dispatching folks to go out there, right?
That's correct.
And so Agent Tercy is on the radio telling the agents to respond to Mr. Kelly's ranch. Is that right?
That is correct.
And Agent Tercy, so presumably Agent Tercy would repeat the information that Agent Morcell tells him. Is that right?
Yes.
And so if Agent Morcell stated, Mr. Kelly stated he's not sure that these people are armed, that's something that Agent Tercy would relay on the radio, right?
I believe so.
Okay. And so presumably if Agent Tercy had a report, his report would contain that information, right?
It should.
So his report would state, if it's consistent with what Agent Morcell is saying, that Mr. Kelly doesn't know if these subjects are armed. Is that right?
It should, but like I said, again, ma'am, I haven't interviewed Mr. Tercy. I don't know exactly if he documented anything.
Probably didn't say that in his report. She's looking at it.
So would it surprise you then if Agent Tercy did not write that down in his report?
I'm going to have to object at this point.
Yeah, because it's...
Basis for your objection?
The objection is we're talking about, this witness already said he has no foundation for what Agent Tercy said, and now we're asking him to speculate.
She's impeaching him.
And, Your Honor, I'm just asking if he's got information about whether this was relayed to Agent Tercy or not, and whether it should have been relayed to Agent Tercy or not.
Dane, go ahead and move on.
So Agent Tercy's in charge of the radio, and he's dispatching the other agents on the ground, right?
As per Agent Morcell, yes.
And who are those agents on the ground who respond?
The ones that responded were Agent Heredia and I can't remember the other agent, but there was two agents. I do recall Agent Heredia.
And did you interview those agents?
I did interview, yes, Mr. Heredia.
And was the other agent Agent Dugan?
We're getting some good names here.
Yes.
Sorry. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Close enough.
But when you interviewed, so those are the two agents who, when you interviewed them, did they indicate that they respond to the ranch?
Yes.
And did they indicate that on the radio they had heard that these subjects were armed?
That's what is relayed to them.
Okay. So the radio that got relayed to the agents on the ground stated that these subjects are armed.
Yes.
And those two agents who go out there, did they make contact with Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
And can you just describe, you interviewed these agents, yes?
Yes.
And they are willing and available to testify, right?
Both of them, yes.
Okay. Can you just describe essentially what they said happened?
They responded to the area after what was relayed to them, and they responded to the ranch. They know the ranch. They've been out there in the past, and they just locked the area to see if they could find anyone.
Okay. And did they encounter Mr. Kelly?
Yes, they did.
And can you just describe that?
They said they found Mr. Kelly walking the property along with his some dogs, and he was just walking the property.
Okay. Was he walking on a road?
Yes.
And was he near his barn?
Yes.
And when he first made contact with this agent on the ground, according to this agent, did Mr. Kelly say that there were armed men carrying backpacks?
That's what they relayed to him.
And he told the agents who responded that these folks were armed with guns?
Yes.
But he couldn't tell which kind or how many?
Yes. And
this is Agent Dugan specifically. Do you remember asking Agent I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. But
Dugan.
do you remember asking him specifically if in his experience he's been out to that ranch before?
Yes.
And he said he had, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he said that he has encountered armed people. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he says he's encountered both handguns and rifles. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And Agent Dugan also stated that the area that Mr. Kelly lives in is a high crime area. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he also said, quote, especially recently, that there has been an increased amount of drug trafficking in that area. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And he said that that drug trafficking is usually done by mules. Is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
And he said that's usually people carrying large backpacks, right?
That's correct.
And you went over the area where he walked on this property. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he
You
have
had
a
a
backpack
map
on?
of the property that you reviewed with him, right?
With who?
With Agent Dugan.
A map?
Did you have a map or a Google Earth or anything like that that you reviewed with him?
No.
Okay. But did you talk to him about where he walked on the property when he was there?
Yes.
And did he confirm for you that he did walk around the area where that body was eventually located?
Around it. Not specifically where the body was found.
So he was in that area where the body was found. Is that right?
Yes.
And obviously he did not locate the body when he was out there. Is that right?
No.
At least not at that time, right?
Not at that time. Yes, that's correct.
And do you remember that you also asked Agent Dugan which type of rifle was the most commonly carried by smugglers?
Yes.
And what did he tell you?
The AKs.
AK-47?
Yes.
Most common rifle carried by drug smugglers?
Yes.
And do you remember if you made a note of that in your report or not?
I can't remember if I did, ma'am.
Okay. But in your recorded interview, he's certainly saying that to you, right?
I believe so.
And that information certainly corroborates what Mr. Kelly stated happened in this case. Is that right?
Yes.
And it's important when you're writing these reports to not just include information that's contrary to Mr. Kelly, but information that supports Mr. Kelly as well. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember Mr. Dugan providing a description of Mr. Kelly when he encountered Mr. Kelly?
Yes, ma'am.
And more specifically, do you remember Agent Dugan saying that Mr. Kelly was wearing a straw hat?
I don't recall that, ma'am.
And you also interviewed an Agent Layugan, is that right?
Another one.
Layugan.
How do you say it?
Layugan?
Layugan?
Yes.
Okay. And did he also indicate that this was a high crime area?
Yes.
And did he also indicate that he's encountered armed individuals out there?
In his experience, yes.
And those are people who are armed with pistols, correct?
Yes.
And also rifles?
Yes.
AK-47 style rifles?
As per his experience, yes.
Like the ones that Mr. Kelly described?
Yes.
And both of these agents, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't both of them state that drug traffickers usually carry guns?
Yes.
And the reason for that is to deal not so much with law enforcement, is that right?
Yes.
But it's really to deal with other groups of people who are out there, is that right?
Rick Cruz, yes.
And when you say RIP crews, are those folks who essentially try to ambush these drug runners and steal their drugs?
They're known as the opposite cartel members.
Okay, so there are other groups of criminals out there who are also armed.
Yes.
It's the
and
border.
who get into violent encounters with drug smugglers who are out there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Wide open.
And that's something that these Border Patrol agents confirmed is something that happens in this area. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it certainly follows that if there's a violent encounter between groups of criminals, they're probably not going to report that to law enforcement, right?
No, ma'am.
And if they're
And
embroiled
did
with law
Agent Layugan
enforcement,
also state that people cross through that property, Mr. Kelly's property, all the time?
As per his experience, yes. He's well.
So that's a high traffic area.
All Keno Springs and his property it's a high traffic area.
his whole property.
And Agent Layugan also stated that Mr. Kelly has called for assistance before. Is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. Kelly has mentioned, according to Agent Layugan, that he calls the Border Patrol Ranch Liaison because their response time is usually faster. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's usually faster than calling just the Sheriff's Department?
It depends.
Okay. And Agent Layugan also confirmed that in the initial call that Mr. Kelly makes, Mr. Kelly stated that these men were armed and possibly shooting at him. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When you interviewed Mr. Kelly, this is after the body's been discovered, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is at nighttime,
Yes, ma'am.
right? And he told you that he'd seen at least 5 people on his property?
His initial statement, yes.
Okay. And that they were carrying backpacks?
Yes.
And that they were carrying weapons?
Yes.
I think you mentioned that Mr. Kelly stated he was chasing someone.
He was and went after them.
Did Mr. Kelly use that word, chasing?
He was running after him.
He told you I ran after them?
He said he was running after him.
And you're sure about that? You're
Yes,
sure he
ma'am.
said that to you?
Yes.
But he probably didn't use the word chasing, is that right?
Chasing or running after him or went after them.
Or
Okay.
went?
And if we review that recorded interview, we're going to hear him say something like
Yes.
chasing or running after?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do you remember if he said instead that he was actually going down the road to check on his barn, to secure his barn?
If he said that to me during the interview?
Did he say that to you? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So he stated he was walking down his road to go check on his barn. Is that right?
To make sure everything was okay. And
To make sure that it was secure?
Yes, ma'am.
And in fact, when Border Patrol gets out there and initially makes contact with Mr. Kelly, he's near his barn. Is that right?
Yes, on the road, yes.
And he's on the road, right?
Yes.
He's not in a wash?
No, ma'am. But
Okay.
I don't recall that, no.
And there's no video that you're aware of that Border Patrol looked at of Mr. Kelly in a wash chasing people?
Not on the wash, but there is a video of Mr. Kelly.
There
And he's
is.
on the road in that video, is that right?
He's not exactly on the road, but on a little hillside next to a road with his 2 dogs.
So he's next to the road?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the scene. This is the
You're
property
stating that in
residence.
the interview that you had with Mr. Kelly that he initially denied that he shot at people. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you're stating that he eventually admitted that he did shoot at people. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Kelly doesn't use the word at. Is that right?
No,
In fact, he kind of pushes back on you in the interview and says, I was not shooting at anyone. I shot over their heads.
I shot over their heads.
Okay. And you sort of frame this in your report as Mr. Kelly changing his story, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you kind of frame that as him initially stating one thing and then stating another thing, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I think in your interview with Mr. Kelly, you claim to Mr. Kelly that shooting at a person is the same thing as shooting over a person.
Basically, ma'am.
So you think that that's basically the same thing?
Yes, ma'am, because I followed up with a question regarding his shooting.
And Mr. Kelly disagrees with you about that in your interview, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you say shooting at, shooting over, same thing, and Mr. Kelly says, I disagree, right?
Yes, yes.
And would you agree that Mr. Kelly is correct that shooting at someone is not the same thing as shooting over someone?
Well, it depends how accurate his shooting is, ma'am.
Well, if he's very accurate and he's shooting at someone, and if he's very accurate and he's shooting over someone, those are 2 very different things, right?
And then I asked him if it was the last time he zeroed in his weapon. He said he hadn't done that.
Well, and my question was if he's very accurate and if he's shooting at someone, and if he's very accurate and he's shooting over someone.
Your Honor, I think we're getting into argumentative and speculative here. I mean, I think the witness has answered the question.
So my question again is if he's very accurate and if he's shooting at someone, and if he's very accurate and if he's shooting over someone, those are 2 very different things, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Nice.
And just in the same way that looking at someone is not the same thing as looking over someone, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And those are actually mutually exclusive. If I'm
Nice.
looking over you, I can't be looking at you, right?
Your Honor, I mean, we're really
Move on,
getting
Ms.
beyond-
Larkin.
So In fact, in this interview, Mr. Kelly consistently states that he fired over people rather than at people. Is that right?
That's what he said.
Okay. Do you remember if you were the one to fill out the booking form in this case, or is that somebody else?
Had nothing to do with the process in the booking. That was done by other Sergeant Garcia.
Okay, that's okay. That's somebody else. I think in the interview, Mr. Kelly also indicated to you that the leader of this group, or somebody in this group, pointed his rifle at Mr. Kelly. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did you make a note of that in your report?
Yes, I did.
Somebody
Okay.
pointed a rifle at Kelly.
And that's obviously a pretty important fact,
Yeah,
right?
no kidding.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
If this person pointed a rifle at Mr. Kelly.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, if this person who's got this backpack and who's carrying this rifle, who's on Mr. Kelly's property, if that person did point a rifle at Mr. Kelly, then Mr. Kelly would be justified in firing over that person, right?
If that weapon was pointed at him, yes.
Would be justified.
Or indeed, he'd be justified in firing directly at that person in that case, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Nice.
In this interview,
Self-defense right there.
You push Mr. Kelly in this interview. Is that fair to
Boom.
say?
No, ma'am. I didn't push him.
In this interview, do you directly tell Mr. Kelly you shot him?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that
Okay.
sounds kind of pushy.
And do you tell Mr. Kelly, I think you have something to tell me?
Yes, I did.
Oh, that sounds pretty
And do you tell
pushy.
Mr. Kelly, this is your time to help yourself out?
Yes.
So you push Mr. Kelly in this interview, is that right?
Not pushing,
Under
ma'am.
objection, argumentative.
Yeah.
Page.
Let me ask you this. What were you hoping to accomplish by asking those questions in that way?
I wasn't trying to accomplish anything other than Mr. Kelly to come forward and tell me the truth of what happened.
Yeah, so you had a
of the
conclusion to make an
totality of the
admission.
circumstances,
Oh.
everything that I got at the time, his stories was not matching. They were inconsistent.
So
Totality
you
of
were trying to get
circumstances.
Mr. Kelly to admit that he shot someone.
Right.
I was asking him to tell me the truth.
Yeah, to admit.
And in your view, the truth was that he shot someone, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So you just wanted him to admit to that.
I just want him to tell me the truth.
Which, in your opinion, was
And
that.
he repeatedly told you, no, I did not shoot anyone.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think you even told Mr. Kelly in your interview, what you're saying doesn't match with what we've heard on the scene, et cetera.
That is correct, ma'am.
And Mr. Kelly, I think, asked you in what way, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you tell Mr. Kelly in what way this didn't match?
I told him it would begin of Mr. Marcel's statement, what I've heard on scene, but I didn't exactly tell him specifically what.
So you didn't tell him what you thought was inconsistent about anything he might have said before?
No, ma'am.
And so you therefore didn't give him an opportunity to explain any of those possible inconsistencies?
No, ma'am.
Nice. Good. So you had a conclusion. You had an outcome you wanted to achieve. You didn't investigate anything else surrounding that.
The prosecutor was asking you some questions about a fence. And I think you described two different fences going through the property near where this possibly took place.
And we pulled up the aerial photo.
Okay. Do you remember if you ever asked Mr. Kelly where these people were in relation to the fence?
No, I didn't.
So you don't know where these people were in relation to the fence?
Other than just saying south of the house.
What kind of fences were these?
These are what you call barbed wire farm fence with T-posts.
Okay. And so that's like 4 strings of barbed wire?
I can't see, I don't remember if it's 4, but it is actually barbed wire.
Okay. Do you remember if there were any cuts in any of these fences?
When we walked during the day, the second time on the warrant, we didn't see any cuts on the fences. The ones I saw.
Did you walk the whole fence?
We walked south of the fence to where the body was.
On
Don't
the
know what
occasion
area.
where this body was located, or let me back up, if you know, and if you don't know, that's okay. But when Border Patrol and the Sheriff's Department first responded in the middle of the day to Mr. Kelly's call regarding this group of individuals, do you know if anybody looked for tracks?
I don't know, ma'am.
You don't know?
No, I don't know.
Okay. And do you know if anybody looked for tracks later in the evening after the body had been discovered?
I do not know that.
Okay. You mentioned some search warrants that were executed in this case. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. You did an initial search warrant or search of the residence and the property at night, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's several hours or so after the body has been discovered, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And during that search, you recover one spent casing, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was that one spent casing?
It's in the back porch towards the right side of the back porch.
Okay. And in fact, that spent casing was discovered by a dog that was there with the ATF, right?
Yes.
Okay. And did the dog search the rest of the yard for any additional casings at that time?
I observed the dog. As soon as the dog hit on that skin, she just stayed there. The agent actually that assisted us with ATF said, this is where I found, and he didn't walk the dog toward the left side where the other cases were found.
So he found that one casing, and then he didn't walk the dog around to see if there were any more casings?
Just around that one casing, not to the other side.
Okay. And you also searched for a bullet, is that right?
Yes, that was the second search warrant.
Okay, so
We
when
don't
this
have those
body was
search warrants
discovered
yet.
and when you did the first search at night,
They haven't published
nobody
those.
searched for a bullet at that time?
I didn't. I don't know if the sergeant that was with the body did a search of the area. I don't know.
Okay.
Like to see those search warrants.
So the search for the bullet that you know about anyway took place the second search, is that right?
When I went out there.
And the second search, when was that in comparison to the first search?
It was a day after.
The day after?
A day after or 2 days after. I can't remember. But it was
Okay.
during the day.
It was during the day. And somebody searches for a bullet and doesn't find any, is that right?
That's correct, ma'am.
And the search was performed on the area near the body, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
No bullets are found at that time, right?
That's correct.
And no spent shell casings near the body were located, is that right?
That's correct.
And the search also included the house, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And the search recovered certain weapons, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And during the first search, you did not believe that you recovered the weapon Mr. Kelly was carrying on the date of the incident. Is that right?
Oh,
That's correct.
there's so much.
But on the first search, you searched the residence, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't locate the
No weapon.
AK-47
We
at that time?
We located one, but it was not the one.
Okay. And so because of that, did you apply for an additional search warrant?
I applied for the second for multiple reasons.
Okay. Was that one of the reasons?
That was one of the reasons.
Okay. And the second search warrant, did that also include the outbuildings on the property?
Yes, the barn shed.
Okay. And the vehicles as well, is that right?
The vehicles and a water pump house.
Okay.
That I think we just
So
looked at.
you applied for the second search warrant, and did you also include the main residence in the second search warrant?
Yes.
Okay. And so then you searched the residence again the second time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And on that second search, you found the weapon, right?
Yes, we did.
And on the second search, that weapon was found hanging on the back of a door, right?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
And the second search is where you also found those additional shell casings, right?
I think this might be the residence.
And I think some of the shell casings that were located in the second search were obviously very old. Is that right?
Not the 8. Detective Bunting actually found additional shell casings, but the ones I found and Detective Bunting found, they were not old.
Okay. So you find 8 shell casings that are not old, right? And when I say not old, what I'm meaning is they're not rusted and weathered, right?
They're not weathered, exposed to the elements, dent, cracked, bent, anything like that.
Okay. And there were some very old shell casings that you found as well, right?
Those were found by Detective Bunting.
And there were 2 of those or something like that?
I believe he said 2.
Okay.
Detective
And
Bundy.
the shell casings that are not obviously very old, do you have any way of knowing how old those shell casings are?
I don't, ma'am.
Okay. That would have to be some sort of expert to analyze how old those shell casings are, how long they've been sitting there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so we don't know at this time how long those 8 shell casings found on the second search or that 1 shell casing found on the first search been there. Is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And just describe for me again where the first discovery of the 1 shell casing was compared to the second discovery of the 8 shell casings were.
So the first casing was found like right at the end of the porch ends to the right. There's, I think, a cacti and some other plants, probably 4 feet to the left of that single. That's where we found the 8 more.
Maybe here?
Okay, so 4 feet apart?
2 or 3,
More or less.
approximate 2 to 4 feet next to the first casing,
Okay.
to the left.
This is the porch, maybe?
Do you have any idea why, and if you don't know the answer, that's okay, but do you have any idea why this weapon was missed on the first search of the residence?
No, ma'am, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. I mean, either it wasn't there, or it was there and you guys just missed it somehow.
It was a long day, and tiredness. We probably missed it.
Okay. And what about the shell casings? Can you explain maybe why you might have missed that group of 8 the first time you searched this place?
It was real. The casings blended in with the gravel on the ground.
Okay. So the first time through, you didn't use a metal detector or anything like that?
No.
And it was nighttime the first time you did the search, right?
We served the warrant right after midnight.
Okay. So it was dark.
It was dark.
Were there any lights that you could turn on to help you do the search? Or,
There was actually the rear porch lights. They were on, but they're not that bright.
so they're not floodlights or anything
No,
like
ma'am.
that? I'm assuming you had flashlights and things.
Yes, ma'am.
And you did have that ATF dog, right?
Yes.
How long was that dog there before?
I learned that he was there prior to my arrival for some hours. I did not make contact with him. When I got there, I made contact. He was in his vehicle with his dog until I executed the warrant. I don't know how long prior to me arriving he was there.
Okay. And just to be clear, there's no way of knowing whether or not any of these shell casings that were found were or were not the results of shots fired by Mr. Kelly on January 30th. Is that right?
Well, they match the ones we found in the AK. To see if those were, no, ma'am.
Okay. And so I just want to ask you a little bit about the arrest in this case. Do you know whose call it was to make the arrest of Mr. Kelly?
I arrested him based on the totality of the circumstances and everything that I gathered.
You conducted the arrest, huh?
So that was your decision to
Yes,
arrest
Your Honor,
him?
this doesn't relate to probable cause in any way.
And Your Honor,
it comes to
it's
this
really
conclusion.
important that we get this information. It's very possible that the state's going to say, I don't get another shot at interviewing this witness outside of this context. And it does go to probable cause because I think it's really significant.
How did he reach that
There's an
decision?
arrest made for first-degree murder.
Yeah.
It goes to the bias in this investigation, which is relevant towards probable cause. And I think I have the right to ask the officer why, at this
100%.
point, with this evidence, they made the call to make the arrest for first-degree murder.
You have to have an...
So you made the call to make the arrest. in
Okay,
this
good,
case,
yeah.
Right? And did you make the call to arrest Mr. Kelly for first-degree murder?
I consulted, but after that, I did make the arrest for first degree.
Who'd you talk to?
So you made the arrest for first-degree murder, okay?
Look at her.
And
Look at the
that involves
prosecutor.
premeditation, right?
Keeps looking at her.
Okay. And can you just describe, you need probable cause to arrest somebody, right? Can you describe what that is? What is probable cause?
It's facts.
Under objection, this calls for a conclusion of law, and
He
this
has
is
to
not relevant to the proceedings.
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, it doesn't have to be accurate, but we do need to know why the arresting officer believes that he has enough information at this point to make the arrest. It goes towards whether or not the investigation is biased. And I'm just trying to ask why he decided at this point to make this arrest.
And Your Honor, that has nothing to do with probable cause here today.
And
What?
It does
What?
because it goes to whether or not there's a bias in this investigation.
World proceed.
What is
Gosh.
probable cause?
Thank you.
facts and circumstances that leads a reasonable person to believe that a crime has been, will be, or has been committed. Ma'am.
And can you describe, those facts have to be articulable, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you articulate all of the facts that led you to the determination that you had probable cause to arrest Mr. Kelly for first-degree murder?
It's the pre-statement that I got from Agent Marcel while conducting the PC statement of the warrant, and his inconsistencies, his story, his statement. That's why I decided to arrest.
Can you describe those inconsistencies specifically?
It's just his first denying he shot, his recollection of either 5 people or 10 people, 15 people.
Okay, but there were
him,
people, though.
Shooting over them, not knowing he zeroed in his weapon. Just the totality of circumstances.
Oh, man. This is
That's
bad.
why I decided to arrest.
And can you describe how those circumstances led you to the conclusion that Mr. Kelly premeditated this?
Your Honor, same objection that this is outside the scope of probable cause.
No, it is not.
And this has nothing to do with today's proceeding.
You have to have an
Today's
arrest.
proceeding is there probable cause today to bind us over to Superior Court?
Right, and you have to
This
have
is
an
not
arrest
relevant
before
to
the
today's
hearing
proceeding.
today. The
Goes
arrest.
to the bias in the investigation, which is relevant, Your Honor.
Absolutely.
And Your Honor, the only issue here is there probable cause today?
Yes, based on the
If there's
arrest.
bias in the investigation, Ms. Larkin can ask all of those questions at trial and
No.
can do that at trial. Today's
No, she's dead
proceeding
wrong.
is about probable cause. We're already at 11 o'clock, and we have
What?
multiple other witnesses
What?
we need to get
She's
to.
hungry.
So I'm going to go ahead and sustain, but I'm going to allow a couple more questions and
Oh
then we're
my
going to
gosh,
take a
she
recess.
sustained that. Oh my gosh.
And just for the record, Your Honor, bias in the investigation is relevant towards whether or not there's probable cause.
Right,
because
totally.
the same investigation.
If the arrest was not justified because he was biased, we shouldn't be here having a preliminary hearing.
Give me one moment, Your Honor.
This is a hearing about the arrest. It's to determine whether the arrest was legitimate or not, whether it was biased or not. The prosecutor is saying we can't talk about the arrest now because we're only
I
talking
don't
about.
have anything else, Your Honor.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Detective. You may go ahead and step down.
Your Honor, I do have rebuttal, but I have rebuttal questions, but if we want to take
Yes, we're going to take a brief recess, and then you can go ahead and do the rebuttal.
Holy
Thank you.
moly. We can't talk about the arrest. All rise. Stand up. All right. All right, let's get some good photos while we're here. Oh, man. This county attorney is not happy with that defense attorney. They don't like each other. Actually, I think the defense attorney doesn't care one way or the other. She's doing an outstanding job. But the county attorney we see here, her name is Kim Hunley. She keeps doing the side eye. She keeps looking over there, giving her the side eye. Okay, that is not really common. All right, if you're practicing in court, you don't sit at your table and look at the other person like that. It's just kind of a weird thing. It's kind of a weird thing to do. You just typically don't do that. You're not addressing each other. You're addressing the court. You're addressing the witness. You're addressing the jurors. You don't just look at each other like this. It's a weird thing to do. You kind of do it if you want to be a jerk and you want to be like an a-hole about it. You kind of will exercise your personal authority over her, kind of like look down on her, try to be menacing. Kim Hunley is the county attorney, right? She's the top attorney for the whole place. And so she's very agitated here. Weak opening statement, weak evidence, massive cross-examination. We're learning all sorts of facts from Miss Brenna Larkin, doing an outstanding job. And Kim Hunley doesn't even want to talk about the arrest. What on earth are we talking about here? Says we can't talk about the decision that Jorge Anza, the guy who was on the stand, he made a decision to conduct an arrest, but we can't talk about that. What is she talking about? Did she go to law school? Did somebody check? Did she go to law school? This is a hearing about the arrest. It's a hearing to determine whether there is enough probable cause to take the felony to the next stage, to bind it over into a trial court. And she doesn't want to talk about this arrest. The judge has allowed it to happen and then cut it off and said, we're going to a break. But, I wanted to just pause on this for a quick moment because this is kind of ridiculous here. They're identifying all of the inconsistencies in George Allen Kelly's statements, and I don't really see a whole lot of them, if we're being honest. I mean, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, right? The discrepancies that they have identified, that they keep making a mountain out of a molehill over, is whether George Kelly said that they were armed or unarmed, but I think that is rebuttable by the fact that there is other evidence from other Border Patrol agents who are out there explaining that they also had evidence that there were armed men roaming around this area. It's high traffic area. There's millions of people in this country as a result of this open border. And the idea that there aren't armed men coming across the border is insane. If you said, no, Rob, the border's safe and secure, there's nobody out there trafficking drugs, I'd be like, are you nuts? Do you know where we live? This is Arizona, man. It's wide open. We had the judiciary hearings yesterday when they were also explaining that in Yuma, that the whole, infrastructure is basically crumbling apart everywhere you look on all these border states. And if you think that it's just Arizona, my friends, if you think that this border war is just going to be limited to Arizona, it's not. It's coming out to all of the other states. So get ready for it. But all right, so even if that was a discrepancy, okay, armed versus unarmed, okay, George said that they were armed, then maybe they were unarmed, don't know, but there were other reports, so you give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. And there were other discrepancies that they say, like the number of men, okay? They said 5 to 10 men, or maybe it was 8 to 10, or maybe 10 to 15, or whatever the numbers were, was a discrepancy, they say. Also, the number of shots that were fired. So he said, I fired a warning shot. They say, well, we found 8 casings. And also the shots that were fired at him, right? He's saying, no, they were firing towards our direction. That's why I had to go and check on my horse to make sure that the horse was safe and okay. But here, each one of those discrepancies, I think if you zoom out on it, you can say that there is actually consistency amongst them, right? They're going to point out all the differences, but let's point out all the different similarities, all the similar facts as they exist. One, every time George Allen Kelly spoke, he said that there were multiple men, right? Multiple men in every statement. He said that he did pick up a weapon and fire back. He admitted it. He called it in. So that's pretty consistent. And they found the one shell casing that they're saying they can attribute to him, but we're not so sure about the others. He was also consistent when he said that there were men shooting, right? That matches a lot of the other reports that came out, I think every time that he spoke to them. Now, they were mincing this. They were said, well, it was shooting and shots versus a shot, plural versus singular. And that all of that leads to inconsistencies, but you could take each one of those factors and basically say that they are consistent amongst all of the different conversations and interviews they had. They were just different levels of consistency, right? And so stories can change, stories can modify, but that doesn't mean that he shot and murdered somebody, right? The evidence on that part is quite weak. So, man, we've gotten a lot of information out of this today, and I was a little bit surprised that this was going to go on. Of course, they don't have grand juries over there, so that's why they really had no choice. And the judge really has no choice because the judge has some other pretty strict timelines by which to process this stuff. And of course, he probably wants it out of his courtroom pretty quickly. But we got some new players who entered the game. All right, so we're summarizing this Jorge Ainza. He was the chief detective, the lead detective, the person who ultimately conducted the arrests. And he gave us some information, walked us through the timeline. They shut off the stream for about, 15, 20 minutes while presumably they were still doing the direct exam. He said that he had some problems with him because he changed shots to shot. He changed his statement from 5 to 10 to 10 to 15. He determined that there was probable cause to conduct the arrest, ultimately decided that first-degree murder was sufficient, and charged him accordingly. Also did multiple interviews, apparently talked to this guy, Jeremy Morsell from the Border Patrol Ranch Liaison, and we actually got to see a little bit of the property, which I thought was kind of interesting. So he gave us the address, which allowed me to look this up. And so you can see if we zoom out on this property, it really is like right on the border, right? I mean, there it is. And if you zoom in on it, you can sort of see the house from far away. It's right there. But the border is right there, right? That's his house. That's the border. It's not far at all. Right there. The White House right there. This is the border. We can zoom in. So we don't know, right, where these guys were coming from. I was sort of thinking that maybe this was the porch area, that maybe the people were up in this area. And so the firing of the bullet over his head, would have been that direction. But the porch, might be a garden back there. This could also be the back patio porch. This looks like a little bit of a porch there. And so then we're trying to piece together where the other scenes are, right, of the property. You can see the sagebrush road. Looks like there's like a little detour road over here, like a little roundabout. And then if you follow this sagebrush road around, you see, I don't know what this is. He said that there was a water pump building, and that might just be sort of like a storage facility. And then I was thinking that maybe this is the barn, right? This is where the horses would be. Looks like a barn. There's vehicles outside next to the barn. Mindless Turtle says, show the gazebo. Was that maybe what that other thing was? Is that a gazebo? Is this maybe the gazebo where you just sort of hang out? I'm not sure. But this is the property, or this is the barn. So presumably the guy, I was thinking of it just sort of this way, right? If he's firing in this direction, so let's say this is the front porch and he comes out and he's firing that direction overhead. Then he hops in his vehicle or whatever, runs over to the barn, which is down here, to check on the horses. That's kind of consistent with his story. But then this little road or a wash, could be a road, looks like a road, might be some other washes kind of in the area. You can see wide open desert, and we can't really see any fences or where all that, all that detail comes from, but that looks like the residence, certainly. So they're still on break. And obviously, we haven't heard from hardly anybody. I'm not sure if we're going to hear from this other gentleman who was there. I'm trying to figure out what I do with him. This guy, lead sheriff. Still don't know his name, but he's sitting there in the red tie and the black shirt. So he might testify. We also know that there's going to be questions about the shell casings. I really like this line of questioning from Brenna, because he said that, no, we got a bunch of rounds, but we don't know how old those are. And it was a beautiful line of questioning. Did you push him? Did you push him to make certain admissions and say certain things? Oh, no, I didn't push him at all. Don't be silly. He would know if I pushed him. And we didn't push him. And she says, well, she went through all of his statements. Well, you told him this and you told him that, right? And you said you shot the guy, didn't you? Yeah, but that wasn't pushing him. Feels like they all just sort of came to the conclusion they wanted to come to. And of course, we'll have to go through some of his statements and understand why there were discrepancies, but Brenna Larkin is doing a heck of a job on it right now. All right, so we've got some new players who entered the game. We'll see if we hear from Jeremy Morsell at any point in time, Border Patrol agent. Agent Tercy was dispatch. Agent Herrera, we've got Detective Bundy, Agent Dugan, and Agent Leyugan. Don't know if there's relation there. However, they both say high crime areas. They talked about, and this was, I think, a fun theory. When you talk about defense, you want to come up with like a theme of your case. They always teach you this in all of the CLEs. They want you to know, or have a theme. And I think this is a very interesting theme that maybe he, depending on what ballistics shows us, that he didn't murder him, that the drug cartel murdered him. Because people are going to want an alternative explanation. I think that's sort of a thing that is wrong in I think that's a sort of a mistake that I know I used to make a lot when I was early practicing attorney. Is people want sort of instinctually in their gut, an alternative explanation. Yes, like you can go into a DUI case, for example, and you can say, oh, they didn't really do like a great job testing this and testing that. And they may have maybe pulled you over for a pretextual stop and all these things. But it's important to have an alternative explanation. You can't just say they did a bad job. You got to have another reason for it. So in this case, if George Kelly is not the shooter, who is? Well, the theme is perfect. The opposing drug cartel, obviously, right? It's a border war out there. And so don't blame Kelly for this. And and oftentimes in criminal cases, you don't have such a nice alternative theme because you're not on the border in the middle of a border war. But of course, in this case, we are. Yeah, and so Bonnie says, didn't the report claim a horse was shot too? I'm not sure. I mean, we really haven't seen any like good reports, have we? We saw the complaint. We saw the motion to modify the release conditions. But he went over to go check on the horse. And I think he said there was no in the complaint, Bonnie says. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe there was. So they're still on break. We don't know how long of a break they'll take. But It's now 11:17 in Arizona. They're getting ready for lunchtime, you know. And so we'll pull up the docket and see what else they have for us. So there was the long form complaint. Let's take a look at that amended complaint, see if we see any horsey activity in there. Get out our red pen. Now, there should be another amended complaint, right? This will be basically the third complaint. First complaint didn't have these two charges. The third complaint is going to amend this from first degree into second degree. And so that has not been filed yet. We'd like to see that. But they say with premeditation did cause death, right? They're already lowering this because they know their case is crap. But I don't know if there's any horsey in here. Dangerous instrument. It must be in the motion to modify, which is here. Kelly provided conflicting info to the police. Agent Morcell said, "I'm being shot at and I'm shooting back." He couldn't talk. They were headed southbound. Yeah, so that sort of matches the graphic here, right? If he's shooting and then heading southbound, he's heading in this direction. So it's literally, right, the group of illegal immigrants comes across the border. They make his way up into the property. He probably owns this whole parcel of land. And then they come upon him. He shoots over their head and then races back down to his barn, which, where did that go? Yeah, it's further down this way. There it is. Yeah, and just races south to his barn right there. Interesting. Okay. So he says, "I'm being shot at. I'm shooting back." That was at 2:30. So we can add that. Did we already add that? Got a lot of good notes here today. Whew. Okay, so this will be something that Agent Morsel said. Conversation shooting back.
Court will now resume. Detective Einstein, if I can have you step up here, and if I can have the state proceed.
State proceed. Okay, we're doing a quick bathroom break. I'll be right back. And then locals, we're going to have to start another stream in a minute. I'll be right back.
Thank you.
Did you learn how long the defendant and Wanda Kelly were married?
Not the marriage.
You know how long they've been in Arizona?
I believe more than 20 years.
They have grown children together, is that correct?
Yes.
They've been living here in Arizona for more than 20 years.
Yes.
And you had contact with her on the evening of the incident, is that right?
Yes.
And you had subsequent contact with her how many days later?
A couple of days later.
And so that's been within a few weeks, is that
Yes.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, to ask the court to reconsider its ruling with respect to the testimony of Wanda Kelly pursuant to State versus Archer, 23 Arizona App 584. It's a Court of Appeals decision from 1975. Again, that's black letter law that talks about what reasonable grounds to believe someone will be for trial means, and it talks about what those factors are. Here, the detective had contact with her just a few weeks ago. We know she's a local Arizona resident. We know she's been married to the defendant for a long time. And previously, the detective testified that Ms. Kelly told him that she was staying with relatives or with friends in Sonoyta. So we know she's local. There's no reason to believe we will not be able to get her under subpoena for a trial in this matter. So the state has reasonable grounds pursuant to State versus Act to believe that she'll be personally available for trial. I'd ask the court to reconsider that and allow me to ask the detective about her statement.
Your Honor, I would just say that if the state's going to come and cite case law at a preliminary hearing, then that should be briefed in advance so that all parties get an opportunity to review the case. and make our own determination about what that case states. I would also just point out that that line of questioning, if Your Honor were to allow it right now, goes outside of the scope of cross-examination. I obviously was not able to cross-examine Detective Ainza on any of Mrs. Kelly's statements, and this is redirect. That's outside of the scope of cross-examination. There's no reason today to know that Mrs. Kelly will be available at a trial. She might or might not be local at that point. She doesn't have to follow any court rules to stay in Arizona or anywhere else for that matter. So I would ask Your Honor to not disturb your previous ruling.
And Your Honor, case law specifically says that a magistrate should not and could not expect parties to brief legal issues. I would not expect that under these circumstances, when we're discussing the defendant's wife, that we would be drawing an objection that we have reasonable grounds to believe she's going to be available for trial. Under these circumstances, that objection is absurd.
So I'm going to affirm on my ruling, so let's go ahead and move on.
So I guess Kelly's wife is not going to come in and testify?
Detective, Ms. Larkin asked you a little bit about Mr. Kelly's statement.
I missed that.
With respect to whether he told you how far away the subjects were. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And did you get a chance to take a look at your report with respect to that?
Yes, sir.
Did you refresh your recollection?
Yes.
What did Mr. Kelly tell you with respect to how far away the subjects were from him?
He informed me they were approximately 100 to 150 yards away.
And would that 100 to 150 yards be beyond those two fence lines along the back of his property that we discussed?
Yes, they're beyond.
I wanted to ask you also with respect to what Mr. Kelly said about when he claimed that this subject pointed the gun at him. Could you describe what he said when he was talking about what he meant by that?
He said during the video, he made a movement where not actually pointing, but as they're running, as a turn, meaning the rifle turned with a person, not actually pointing at them.
So he never told you that someone was taking aim at him, is that correct?
That's correct.
He just said that as they were running with the rifle, they turned toward him, and so then that means the rifle pointed in his direction. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the bottom line is Mr. Kelly admitted he shot in the direction of those individuals, but claimed it was over their heads. Is that right?
That's correct.
Washed them. I mean, a sort of a quick wash. It's my house,
And Detective Ainsa, if the dispatch is originally told that shots are being exchanged, are they going to change that even if they get additional information, which leads them to believe there may not be weapons, or will they continue to err on the side of caution?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you reviewed the call logs to determine exactly what was dispatched in this case?
Our call logs, no, not even Border Patrols.
And so if there was a change that went out during that dispatch with respect to those, you haven't reviewed any of those yet, is that right?
No, ma'am.
Did Mr. Kelly tell you which weapon he used to shoot over the heads of the individuals?
AK.
The AK-47.
Yes.
And did he describe the one that you had?
Yes.
And is that the item of evidence we just looked at with respect to the photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
Did that match the description Mr. Kelly gave you?
Yes, it did.
So he was honest about that, too.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, we're done with him.
What's next witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls DRR.
VRR. All right, so we're probably going to lose video on this.
I can have the victim DRR please brought in, and at this point, can I have the streaming stop?
The streaming stopped or just the video stopped? Okay, just the video. Hopefully we still get the audio. Which we're not hearing currently. Come on. I hear something. Come on, guys, give us the audio. Judge said the audio. Come on. Bonnie's right. Yeah, they might just be bringing us back on in a little bit. Bring the witness out, go through the whole process, put him on, then give us the audio? VRR. So we'll keep this open, and we'll just open up the mind map, and we'll attend to the mind map and get this nice and organized as we're listening to the rest of the testimony. Okay, so we've got some serious notes in here. Holy moly, we added a lot here today. All right, so we've got a timeline and a location we're assembling. We've got the physical location, the new charges. This is going to be amended again. So basically, we're going to get a new charge on this one. So we got to add that. So new amended complaint. We'll want to mark that for follow-up. 8 rounds. We still got questions about the bullets. So we have VRR who is coming in next. And VRR, as we talked about previously, was one of the people who was... No, not one of the decedents. So VRR is somebody else who was there, but is not a named victim. Okay, so we'll have to have another witness section. So we'll have witnesses coming in addition to law enforcement. And VRR is going to be the first one up. We're still trying to figure out where that one comes from. So let's see if it's here. Get rid of that complaint because that one's old. All right. 6 minutes later, called Morsel again. Just trying to find where that VRR. Okay, here we go. DRR. Maybe she said DRR. She could have said DRR maybe, and that's this person. Okay. They call it a very large 170-acre property, AK-47, striking and killing one of them. They said he posed no threat to him or his family, they say, even though they're trespassing on his property in the middle of a high-traffic drug zone, as confirmed by many other people, including Border Patrol. All of them have confirmed that this is a dangerous area. His property is right on the border. Married, wife's a local resident, extensive property in Keno Springs, long-term Arizona resident, lives in Santa Cruz County. DRR indicates that he's having nightmares and difficulty sleeping due to flashbacks from being shot at and watching Gabriel die. All right, so we'll see if this is DRR. Again, we don't know if that's who the next witness is. But certainly traumatic, yeah, to be illegally crossing the border and invading somebody's property and then run away. All right, so That is DRR, and I think this is his statement. So having nightmares. Okay. From being shot at and watching Gabriel die. So we'll see if that's who comes out. Yeah, wearing camo, wearing backpacks, high traffic drug zone, you know. I don't like anybody dying. I don't want anybody to be shot and killed. But we also, you know, have rights and freedoms in this country that we have to hold the line on. And it feels like that's not happening here. All right, so we have this amended complaint. Now, I don't know if we're going to get any audio because we're still live. Lisbeth Tolano says, isn't the audio supposed to be available? Yes, there it is. I hear something coming. Thought I heard something in the background over there. All right, so let's get the photo of this guy in here. We'll get our former detective or current detective.
Have you sit down, and I'm going to have you speak into the microphone so we can hear you.
Now, is this going to be in English, or are they going to translate this for us?
Interpreting for you.
Could be
Go ahead and
translation.
proceed.
And just for the record, Your Honor,
Yes.
I'd object to this witness's testimony today. I was only recently made disclosure on this witness. It came in the form of a 6-minute recording that I received yesterday. That recording was done in Spanish. Nobody provided me with any supplement that provided any context for when this person came forward, how this person came forward, or anything of that nature. So the only thing I have to prepare cross-examination with was 6 minutes of a recorded statement in Spanish.
You.
Cool. 6 minutes, Spanish.
Your Honor, I think we've already addressed the disclosure issue. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for coming. As you understand, we're going to go by your initials in this case. Are your initials DRR?
Okay, it is DRR.
Formó, nos vamos a referir a usted por sus iniciales. Sus iniciales son DARR.
DR.
Yeah.
Sir, can you tell us, were you present during the death of Gabriel Quinn Butimea?
Señor, ¿estaba usted presente durante el fallecimiento de Gabriel Quinn Butimea?
Sí.
Yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about that day.
Quiero hacerle unas preguntas acerca de ese día.
And let me just ask you a few things about yourself first.
Permítanme hacerle unas preguntas acerca de sí mismo primero.
Sí.
Yes.
Can you tell me what you do for a living?
¿Me puede decir cuál es su oficio? ¿Qué se dedica?
Trabajo en el campo.
I work in the field.
And can you tell me, have you crossed into the country, into the United States before the incident we're talking about with Gabriel?
¿Me puede decir usted si ha cruzado a los Estados Unidos antes del incidente que nos referimos aquí de Gabriel?
Sí.
Yes.
Can you tell me how many times you think you've crossed into the United States?
¿Me puede decir usted cuántas veces piensa usted que ha cruzado a los Estados Unidos?
De 6 a 7 veces.
6 to 7 times.
Wow.
And can you tell me how many times you've been caught by Border Patrol as you crossed into the United States?
¿Me puede decir usted cuántas veces lo ha detenido la patrulla fronteriza cuando ha cruzado a los Estados Unidos?
Todas las veces.
Every time.
And have you been convicted for crossing into the country illegally?
¿Lo han acusado o detenido por cruzar a los Estados Unidos ilegalmente?
Por cruzar ilegalmente, sí.
By crossing illegally, yes.
And then did you actually do some time in custody for those illegal crossings?
¿Pasó usted tiempo detenido por esas cruzadas ilegales?
Sí.
Yes.
Nice.
I want to go now to January 30th of 2023. Do you remember that day?
Quiero irme ahora a la fecha del 30 de enero del 2023. ¿Recuerda usted esa fecha?
Sí.
Yes.
Before you started out that day, what was your plan for the day?
Antes de que comenzara usted el día, ¿cuál era su plan para ese día?
Llegar a Phoenix.
Arrive in Phoenix.
Íbamos para Phoenix.
We were going to Phoenix.
And where did you start your travel that day?
¿Dónde comenzó su viaje usted ese día?
De Nogales por el muro.
Along the wall in Nogales.
Can you tell me who you were with that day?
¿Me puede decir usted con quién estaba ese día?
Pero nomás con Gabriel.
Well, that was just with Gabriel.
And when you were with Gabriel that day, did you make arrangements with someone for your passage into the United States?
Y cuando estaba usted con Gabriel ese día, ¿hizo usted algún acuerdo o arreglo para entrar a los Estados Unidos?
Pagamos.
We paid.
Did you pay in advance or did you make arrangements to pay later?
¿Pagó por adelantado o hizo algún arreglo para pagar después?
No, pagamos la mitad y lo después ya estando allá.
No, we paid half and then the other half when we got there.
And what was the cost for your crossing?
¿Y cuál fue el costo por que usted cruzara?
$2,500.
$2,500.
And you paid half up front?
¿Pagó la mitad de antemano?
Sí.
Yes.
And how were you going to pay the remainder of your crossing fee?
¿Cómo iba a pagar el resto de esta tarifa para cruzar?
Ya trabajando estando allá.
While I was working, being over there.
And when you say over there, where do you mean?
Cuando dice estando allá, ¿a qué se refiere?
Porque
¿A dónde?
Allá en Phoenix.
Over there in Phoenix.
Were there other people? You said you started just with Gabrielle, but were there other people who joined you that day?
Había otras, bueno, dice usted que comenzó nomás con Gabriel, pero ¿hubo otras personas que se unieron a ustedes durante el día?
Objection, Your Honor, it's leading.
5 más, éramos 7.
Overruled. Go ahead.
7 personas.
There were 7 people.
Does that include you and Gabrielle, or is that in addition to you and Gabrielle?
¿Eso incluye a usted y a Gabriel o eso es aparte de usted y Gabriel?
A mí y al Gabriel.
No, me and Gabriel.
It includes you, so 7 in total.
¿Los incluye? Entonces,
Sí.
7 en total?
Sí.
Yes.
And when you made arrangements for your crossing, did you have a person you contacted for that crossing?
Entonces, cuando hizo los arreglos para cruzar, ¿conocía usted o se comunicó con una persona para cruzar?
Sí.
Yes.
And how did you refer to that person?
¿Cómo se refería a usted a esa persona?
Por el Cholo.
As el Cholo.
And do you know how you got into contact with this El Cholo to make your arrangements?
¿Sabe usted cómo inició la comunicación con esta persona, el Cholo, para hacer sus arreglos?
No.
No.
Who most made those arrangements for you?
¿Quién hizo esos arreglos por usted?
Lo conocí, lo miramos en la obra y dijo que él los podía cruzar baratos para allá.
The person needs to clarify, Your Honor. We saw them at their job site, and he told us that he could make arrangements to take us over there.
So you met this individual, El Cholo, through work, and he offered to help you cross.
Entonces usted conoció a este señor, el Cholo, durante el trabajo, y él ofreció ayudarlo a cruzar?
Sí.
Yes.
And did you meet at this location? How did you end up at the location you were in?
Bueno, entonces se reunieron en este sitio. ¿Cómo es que llegaron a reunirse en el sitio donde estaban?
porque ya cuando teníamos el dinero le dijimos que estábamos listos y entonces él dijo, pues, ya de esto, dijo y lo llevó.
Bernie's repetition, Your Honor.
You can ask him to speak closer to the microphone. There you go.
Los pidió que tal día íbamos a salir y ese día salimos.
He told us what day we were going to leave, and that's the day we left.
Did you meet up in Nogales or did you meet up at some other location?
¿Se reunieron en Nogales o se reunieron en alguna otra?
En el muro fronterizo.
In the border, right on the wall.
And you said it was in Nogales. Do you know, was it east of town, west of town, in the middle of town? Where were you?
Bueno, dice usted que fue Nogales. ¿Sabe usted si era al este, al oeste, en medio del pueblo? ¿Dónde fue?
Al oeste, al monte.
To the west, in the mountain.
Okay, and you pointed that direction and you said west. What kind of neighborhoods, or do you know any of the areas, what the locations are called?
Bueno, usted apuntó a esa dirección y dijo que era el oeste. ¿Conoce usted o sabe si hay algún vecindario o cómo se llaman algunos vecindarios de esa área?
Nomás Kino Springs.
Just Kino Springs.
So it was near Kino Springs that you met up?
Entonces fue cerca de Kino Springs donde se reunieron.
Sí, para cruzar.
Yes, to cross.
Is that where you crossed into the United States?
¿Y fue ahí donde cruzó a los Estados Unidos?
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you crossed into the United States there, how did you cross?
Entonces cuando llegó y cruzó a los Estados Unidos, ¿cómo fue que cruzó?
Al final del muro.
At the end of the wall.
So you went to where the wall ends and you crossed around the end of the wall, is that right?
Entonces fue a donde termina el muro y cruzó.
It's wide open, nobody's down there.
Sí, pegado a la sierra.
Yes, close to the mountain range.
And when you crossed, you said you're close to the mountain range. Where did you go from there?
Bueno, cruzó cerca de la sierra y después, ¿a dónde se fue de ahí?
Íbamos a cruzar el Washington.
We were going to cross the Washington.
And when you say Washington, do you know if there's any other description for that area?
Cuando usted dice el Washington, ¿sabe usted si hay alguna otra descripción para esa área? No.
Do you know if it's called Washington Camp?
¿Sabe usted si le dicen Washington Camp?
Section leading.
Nomás sé que Washington.
I just know that it's Washington.
And is it near any roads that you're familiar with?
¿Está cerca de alguna calle que usted conoce?
This is all very tedious. It's like, is he in there or not? Let's go.
Dirt road.
And the 7 of you that crossed that day, can you tell us, was it men, women, children? Who all was crossing?
Yes, los 7 de ustedes que cruzaron ese día. ¿Puede decirnos si eran hombres, mujeres,
Probably
niños?
Hombres.
¿Quién cruzó?
Hombres.
Men.
Hombres, yeah.
And as your plan was to cross, and you said you were in the mountains, your plan was to go to the Washington area, you said, right?
Entonces, usted nos dijo que su plan era cruzar y cruzó por la sierra y su plan era ir al área de Washington, ¿es así?
Iba a Phoenix, pero cruzar la carretera de Washington.
We were going to Phoenix, but we were going to go across the road in Washington.
So your plan was to cross that road in the area of Washington, is that right?
El plan era cruzar ese camino en el camino a Washington, ¿correcto? Yes.
How long had you been traveling in the United States? Tell me what's the next thing that happened while you were traveling.
¿Cuánto tiempo duró? Dígame qué fue lo que ocurrió después de que empezaron a viajar.
Ya cuando íbamos a cruzar el Washington, como a las 11, 12, bajó una border patrol y pues íbamos cansados y regresé y a correr para atrás para que no los detuviera la border patrol.
Bernie's clarification here.
Sí.
So we were crossing at Washington Camp around 11 or 12, and we saw that a border patrol came down, and we were tired, so we turned back so that they wouldn't catch us.
And when you turned back, what did you do?
Cuando retrocedieron, ¿qué fue lo que hizo?
Agarramos para caminar para atrás a buscar al muro por donde habíamos cruzado.
Well, we started walking back, looking for the wall where we had crossed.
And how long do you think you traveled after that?
¿Cuánto tiempo cree usted que caminaron después de eso?
Como una media hora.
About half an hour.
Ya donde pasó y el señor lo disparó.
When we were walking and this gentleman here shot at us.
And I saw that you gestured at someone. Do you see the individual here today that shot at you?
Y vi que hizo un gesto señalando a alguien. ¿Ve usted al individuo que le disparó a usted?
Sí.
Yes.
Can you describe what he's wearing and where he's sitting for the court, please?
¿Puede describir dónde está sentado y qué trae puesto para el juez, por favor?
Traía una camisa gris así como la que trae puesta.
He had a gray shirt, just like the one he's wearing now.
Your Honor, would the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant?
So reflected.
So let's back up just a little bit. Tell us, just before the shooting started, where were you coming from?
Vamos a retroceder un poquito. Díganos, por favor, antes de que comenzara los disparos, ¿de dónde venía usted?
De la carretera del Washington.
From the Washington Road.
Estábamos descansando.
We were resting.
Okay, and where were you resting after you left for a half an hour from the Washington Road?
¿Dónde estaban descansando después de que descansaron esa media hora que se fueron?
Después de las casitas, arriba pegado a la sierra. Pegado a la sierra.
Oh, close to the mountain, right?
Del King Spring, de las casitas de King Spring para arriba.
From the houses there at Keno Springs up towards there.
Where his house was.
And then when you were resting, what did it look like where you were that you were resting?
Mientras usted estaba descansando, ¿cómo se veía el lugar donde estaban descansando?
Es tranquilo, no había nada.
It was peaceful. There wasn't anything there.
So what was nearby you in terms of, were there any roads? Was there any terrain? What was the terrain like?
Bueno, ¿cómo se veía el área? ¿Había caminos? ¿Cómo se veía el terreno?
Carretera la que viene directo al muro.
The road that goes directly to the wall.
Okay. And could you describe that road for us?
¿Puede describir ese camino para nosotros?
Y del camino vienes al muro y luego está un arroyo.
Well, the road leads all the way to the wall, and then there's a wash.
And what kind of road is it? Is it a paved road? Is it a gravel road? Is it a dirt road? What type of road?
¿Qué tipo de camino es? ¿Es un camino pavimentado, de grava o de tierra?
De tierra.
It's a dirt road.
And after you were resting on the dirt road, what's the next thing that you did?
Y después de que descansaron en ese camino de tierra, ¿qué fue lo que hicieron después?
Caminar. Regresar, pero ya no alcanzamos a caminar tanto cuando nadie los empezaron a disparar.
Well, we walked, but we didn't get a chance to walk very far before we started receiving shots, getting shot at.
Before the shot started, did you see any animals nearby?
Antes de comenzaran los disparos, ¿vio usted algún animal cerca?
Caballo.
A horse.
A horse.
And what did the horse look like?
¿Y cómo se veía el caballo?
Se miraba medio malión el caballo, está malo, flaco. Caballo flaco.
It was a skinny horse.
And what color?
¿Qué color?
Colorado.
Red.
Red horse.
And as you were walking and you see the horse, is it as you're walking down the road, is it, what do you see next what happens next after you see the horse?
Bueno, entonces como van caminando y ven el caballo y siguen caminando en el camino, ¿qué pasa después de que ven el caballo?
No, el caballo estaba parado comiendo.
No, the horse was just standing there eating.
Okay. And what happened after you saw the horse?
Okay. ¿Y qué pasó después de que vieron el caballo?
Fue cuando empezó a disparar.
When he started shooting.
And when you first heard the shots, what did you do?
Cuando recién escuchó los disparos, ¿qué hizo usted?
Volteamos a ver para todos lados y como nadie los hablaba, no sabíamos de dónde venían las balas.
So we started looking around, but because nobody was saying anything, we didn't know what direction the shots were coming from.
And what did you do?
¿Qué hizo usted?
Did you stand there or did you?
A Gabriel que me dijo, me dieron, agarró el pecho y lo voló los ojos y ya se tiró. Entonces, como yo venía atrás de él caminando y miré al caballo que ya le estaban disparando al caballo, ya miré de qué lado lo estaban disparando.
So I did nothing. I saw Gabriel, he held his chest and he said, I'm hit, and he fell down, rolled his eyes, and then I looked around and I saw that they were shooting at the horse. An interpreter needs to verify.
What'd you say? They were shooting at the horse?
Yes, I saw that they were shooting at the horse.
Shooting at the
So
horse.
let me break that down just a little bit. You said that you heard some shots and you looked around. Did you stand there in the roadway or did you go somewhere from there?
Vamos a desglosar esto. Usted dijo que escuchó disparos y se quedó ahí en el camino parado.
Ya que Gabriel estaba muerto.
After Gabriel was dead.
Let me clarify. So when you first heard the shots, were you still standing in the road?
Quiero aclarar algo. Cuando recién escuchó los disparos, ¿todavía estaba parado en el camino?
Volteamos a ver para todos lados porque los dos veníamos los dos juntos.
We turned and looked everywhere because we were both together.
And how many shots do you think you heard?
¿Cuántos tiros cree usted que escuchó?
De 15 a 16.
In 15 to 16.
Okay, well, they found 8 casings.
When the shots were happening, were you moving at that point?
Cuando estaban ocurriendo esos disparos, ¿estaba en el movimiento usted?
No, parado.
No, just standing.
Viendo para todos lados para ver de dónde los disparaban.
This looks like it's the horse barn, so they're in this area. They're on this road.
Looking around to see where they were coming, but then when the person fell, that's...
Were you directly on the road or were you off in the brush?
¿Estaba parado sobre la calle o estaba a un lado en
el monte?
In the mountain, on the hill.
Okay. So how far do you think you were from the road?
¿A qué distancia cree que estaba usted del camino?
4 o 3 metros.
Maybe 4 or 3 meters.
And then once the shooting started, you said that you were looking around, and what did you do then?
Entonces, ya que comenzaron los disparos, usted dijo que empezó a voltear para todas partes. ¿Y qué hizo después?
Cuando ya miré a Gabriel que estaba tirado, cuando me dijo él que se agarró el pecho y me tiró la mano y me dijo, me dieron, yo quedé viéndolo y pues el caballo, siguió disparando y el caballo se murió porque el caballo brincó para allá y brincaba para atrás y entonces pues yo logré tirarme y agarrar el barranco, el arroyo.
So when Gabriel told me that he had been shot and he fell down, he grabbed his chest and stretched out his hand. Then I saw that the horse had been shot and the horse was jumped over and I think he died. And then I just went face down.
Okay, let's break that down a little bit.
A horse got shot and died?
So when you
who shot the horse?
You said that there were some shots. How many shots do you think it was before Gabriel was killed?
Vamos a desglosar esto un poquito. Usted dice que escuchó unos disparos. ¿Cuántos disparos?
The horse was dumped over and I think he died.
Antes de que Gabriel
is what the testimony was.
Como al cuarto disparo.
Around the 4th shot.
And when that happened, where were you in relation to Gabriel?
Y cuando pasó eso, ¿dónde estaba usted en relación con Gabriel?
Perdón.
I'm sorry. Cuando eso ocurrió, ¿dónde estaba usted en relación con Gabriel?
Atrás de él.
Behind him.
And how far away do you think you were from him?
¿A qué distancia cree usted que
A
estaba
un paso.
de él? 1 step.
When you heard the shots, did you just hear the shot, or were you able to hear things around you being hit?
Cuando usted escuchó los disparos, ¿nomás escuchó el disparo o pudo escuchar otras cosas alrededor de usted que estaban siendo impactadas?
No.
No.
I guess I didn't ask that question well because I'm not sure what the no answer responds to. So you heard the shots, is that right?
Escuchó los disparos, ¿verdad? Yes.
Did you hear the shots hitting anything?
¿Escuchó que los disparos hacían impacto con algo más?
No. Nomás cuando le pegaron a él y después nomás al caballo.
No, just when they hit him and then the horse.
And so when you heard the shot, or when you heard the shots and you saw Gabrielle get hit, tell me exactly what you saw.
Cuando escuchó los disparos y vio que a Gabriel le dio un tiro, dígame exactamente qué vio.
Nomás miré el caballo que siguió como siguieron disparando, entonces el caballo pues brincó para acá y brincaba para atrás, brincaba y brincaba, y yo ya no pude otra cosa más que hacer, pues cuando miré el caballo que paró las patas para arriba, entonces pues yo brinqué al arroyo y fue el que me salvó a mí.
Well,
Porque sí, a mí me estaba tirando a mí también.
so nothing. Well, I saw the horse and I saw that the shots hit the horse and he was just jumping back and forth, back and forth. And then I saw that he fell down with his legs up in the air, and I went into the wash, and that's what saved me.
Whose horse is dead?
So I actually wanted to ask you about what you observed about when Gabrielle was shot. So
Where
let
did
me
this
ask
dead
you that
horse
a little
come
better.
from?
Permítame hacerle esta pregunta un poquito mejor porque lo que yo quiero saber es lo que usted vio acerca de cuando Gabriel recibió el disparo.
Tell me what you saw. You said that you saw Gabrielle shot. Tell me what you saw of Gabrielle, what you observed about Gabrielle when the shot was fired.
Mire, quiero que me diga que usted dice que vio que Gabriel recibió un impacto. Quiero que me diga usted lo que vio en Gabriel cuando recibió la bala.
Todo lo que me dijo, me dieron, y estiró la mano y blanqueó los ojos.
So he just said, I'm hit, and he stretched out his hand and rolled his eyes.
So for the record, I see you grabbing your chest with your right arm and extending your left
Y
arm.
cayó.
So para que conste en el acta, veo que usted se coge el pecho con su mano derecha y con la izquierda lo extiende. Yes.
And you said that he said something. What is it that he said?
Usted dice que él dijo algo. ¿Qué fue lo que él dijo?
Me dieron.
I'm hit.
And then you mentioned something about what you observed with his eyes. Can you tell me what you saw in his eyes?
Y usted mencionó que vio algo en sus ojos. ¿Me puede decir qué fue lo que vio usted en sus ojos?
They rolled in the back of his
El
head.
caballo.
A horse.
I'm not talking about the horse. I'm talking about Gabrielle.
No, no hablo del caballo. Hablo de Gabriel.
Más que cuando tiró y volteó los ojos.
Just when he fell down and rolled his eyes.
Okay, that's what I was asking you about. You said he rolled his eyes. What do you mean by he rolled his eyes?
Eso es lo que le quiero preguntar. Que volteó los ojos. ¿Qué quiere decir que volteó los ojos?
Porque ya volteó los ojos y ya me dijo, me dieron, y él cayó y se estiró.
No, well, that's what he said. He said, I'm hit, and he rolled his eyes, and he fell, and he stretched out.
And I saw, just for the record, I saw you roll your eyes back in your head, and the whites of your eyes were showing. Is that what you're describing?
Y nomás para que
She really wants to make sure we have this emotional punch. Just so the judge knows that his eyes rolled in the back of his head. He's dead. He's dead. We got it.
Está describiendo. Yes.
We got it.
And you said that you were behind Gabrielle. When he fell down, how did he fall on the ground?
Dice usted que usted estaba detrás de Gabriel.
Like he got shot in the back?
Cayó, ¿cómo cayó al suelo?
Cayó así. Dieron.
He fell like this, and he told me, I'm hit.
Yeah,
and did he fall on his front, on his side, or on his back, or something else?
Y cayó de frente,
No.
de lado,
He
de
said-
espalda, o algo más.
Gabriel said, that
like
white
this.
guy shot
Like
me 3 times. I mean, 1 time. And he's in the house over there, in the
Like
barn
this.
over there.
And he said, I'm hit.
That's what he said, yeah. Definitely a white guy and not a drug cartel that shot him.
Once he fell into the
Definitely.
ground, what did you do?
Ya que cayó él al suelo, ¿qué hizo usted?
Correr.
I ran.
And when you
Seguían
ran, did you see Gabriel's body while you were running?
Mientras usted corría, ¿vio el cuerpo de Gabriel?
Tirado.
Laying down.
And did you pass by his body in some way?
¿Pasó usted por su cuerpo de algún modo?
Por encima de él.
Over him.
You jumped over him?
¿Brincó sobre él?
Is that, you have to answer out loud.
Tiene que decir en voz alta.
Sí, brinqué.
Yes, I jumped.
So you jumped over his body as you were running?
Entonces brincó sobre su cuerpo conforme iba corriendo.
No, pasé por encima de él nomás así.
No,
Porque ya no pude ayudarle yo a agarrarle la mano, porque dije yo, pues si están disparándolo todavía, pues no puedo agarrarle la mano yo y ayudarlo.
So no, I just stepped over. I couldn't help him. I couldn't reach out and touch and grab his hand because they were still fighting, so I couldn't help him.
And when you said they were still fighting, do you mean there were still shots being fired?
Cuando dice usted que seguían tirando, quiere decir que todavía estaban tirando disparos.
Todavía los tiraba más.
Yes, they were still firing.
Firing, okay.
Still firing more than 8 rounds?
As you stepped
15
over
rounds?
his body, did you see whether he moved at all, or were you able to take a minute to look, or what were you doing at that point?
Cuando usted pasó sobre el cuerpo de él, ¿pudo ver si se estaba moviendo? ¿Pudo ver o qué vio en ese momento?
No, ya nomás que me dijo él, cuando me dijo que le habían dado, ya no, yo lo que miré, ya no pude ayudarle yo, entonces le pasé por encima y porque miré que como seguían disparando, ya fue cuando miré yo el caballo, que siguió con lo mismo del caballo.
So no, once he told me that he had been hit and I saw it, I couldn't help him. Then I saw the horse and I just ran. They were still firing.
Okay, so let's talk about the horse now.
Yeah.
Tell me what you observed as
Let's
the
talk about
shots
the
were being
horse.
fired with respect to the horse.
Ahora, acerca del caballo, dígame usted lo que vio acerca del caballo mientras estaban disparándole al caballo.
No miré a nadie más.
I didn't see anybody else.
So my question was, I want to ask you about the horse now.
Mi pregunta es esta, ahora le quiero preguntar sobre el caballo.
What did you see happen with the horse while the shots were being fired?
Mientras estaban los disparos, ¿qué fue lo que usted vio con el caballo?
El caballo brincó brincaba y relinchaba, separaba las patas y luego paró para abajo, entonces pues yo fue lo que aproveché y me tiré por encima y me tiré al arroyo y seguí buscando a ver si no me seguían disparando, me seguían correteando.
So the horse was jumping, he was rearing up, his hands up in the air, and the horse was just moving around, and so that's when I jumped into the wash.
Okay, and is that why you thought the horse was shot, because you saw it rearing up on its hind legs and jumping around?
Y fue por eso que usted pensó que habían disparado
So
al
maybe the
caballo,
horse
porque
wasn't
lo vio
shot.
relinchando y
Porque
brincando.
de ahí de ese lado del caballo los estaban disparando.
Because from that side of the horse, they were shooting at us.
Okay, so you saw the horse's actions and you knew that it was on the other side of the horse that you were being shot at, so you just made the assumption that the horse was shot?
Entonces usted vio cómo se estaba comportando el caballo,
So the
vio que
horse
se
wasn't
movía,
shot.
que los disparos venían del otro lado del caballo, por eso usted asumió que le habían disparado al caballo.
Y a mí.
And me. They were firing at me.
Okay. But it was being fired on you from the other side of the horse, is that what you're saying?
Pero le estaban disparando a usted del otro lado del caballo, ¿eso es lo que usted dice?
Sí.
Yes.
And after you said you ran, how far away did you run from Gabriel's body?
Usted dice que corrió. ¿Qué tan lejos alcanzó a correr? ¿Qué tan lejos del cuerpo del Gabriel alcanzó usted a correr?
Como a 20 metros,
About 20 meters
cuando volteé a ver para atrás.
when I turned around to see him.
Okay. And when you turned around, what did you see?
Y cuando usted volteó a ver, ¿qué fue lo que vio? The gentleman.
And I just for the record, I see that you've pointed in the direction of the defendant, for the record. Did you, when you saw the individual, where were you, when you saw the individual, I saw you turn and look over your shoulder. Is that what you did? Or did you do something else?
Cuando usted volteó y vio al individuo, cuando usted volteó y vio a la persona, al individuo, ¿usted volteó a verlo o qué fue lo que hizo?
Porque volteé a ver si venían más, si venían gobierno más detrás de nosotros, porque pensamos que era gobierno, que venían detrás de mí, y logré brincar el muro al lado mexicano.
I turned around to see if it was government agents coming after us because we thought it was the government that was after us. And so I was able to jump, and I jumped the wall back to Mexico.
Back to Mexico.
So let me back you up a little bit. When you first started to run away,
so they brought this guy back into the United
20
States.
meters away.
What are they going to give him
and you looked
for
back
this testimony?
And you saw Mr. Kelly. Where did you see him? Where was he standing?
Is he in a hotel right now?
Vamos a regresarnos un poquito. Cuando usted dice que corrió y que estaba como a 20 metros y que volteó y vio al señor Kelly, ¿dónde estaba él parado?
Pues cuando ya ha sido los balazos, donde estaba el caballo y donde estaba Gabriel.
Where the shots had been fired from, where the horse was, where Gabriel was.
Okay. And after you saw him there, what did you do?
Y después de que usted lo vio ahí, ¿qué fue lo que hizo usted?
The first thing.
¿Qué fue lo primero que usted hizo?
Correr al muro.
Run to the wall.
So you just kept running.
Usted siguió corriendo.
Hasta el final del muro.
To the end of the wall.
How many times do you think you got a look at Mr. Kelly?
¿Cuántas veces cree usted que pudo ver al señor Kelly?
Una vez.
One time.
One time. And how close were they?
And then you said when you got to the wall, you kept running until you got to the wall. Is that right?
Dice usted que cuando llegó al muro, dice usted que corrió hasta llegar al muro, ¿correcto?
Sí.
Yes.
And then were you able to make it back into Mexico?
Y entonces usted pudo regresar a México.
Sí.
Yes.
Did anyone in your group have any kind of weapons that day?
Yeah, we had a bunch of drugs too. Yeah, we had
no.
We had weapons and drugs. Yeah, tons of them. Oh,
in the
said
times
no.
that you've been arrested crossing the border in the past, did you ever have any weapons in your possession?
No, of course not.
Las veces que usted lo arrestaron cruzando
Or
la
drugs.
frontera, en esas otras ocasiones, ¿usted había cruzado armado?
No.
Of course not. No. No.
What was
We're here to work,
Gabriel
man.
wearing that day? Do you remember?
Women and children with 7 dudes coming across.
Gabriel ese día?
Camisa café y pantalón café.
A black shirt and brown shirt, and brown pants.
And when you say brown, what color of brown do you mean?
Y cuando usted dice café, ¿qué tono de café? ¿A qué color de café se refiere?
Café así igual al de él.
Smuggling Bibles,
brown,
not guns.
Like his?
Like his shirt or like his pants?
¿Como el color de los pantalones o como el color de la camisa? De la camisa.
Sí.
The shirt.
So like the khaki shirt that the detective is wearing standing next to you? Or that the officer is wearing standing next to you?
Así un color khaki como la camisola que trae la gente que está parada enseguida de usted? Yes, like that.
Do you know what he was wearing on his feet that day?
Black and khakis.
¿Usted sabe qué traía puesto él en sus pies ese día?
Zapatos café.
Brown shoes.
And brown, do you mean the same color brown that we were just discussing, or do you mean a different color brown?
Y cuando dice café, ¿se refiere al mismo café que estamos hablando ahorita o era otro tono de café?
Así como casi el del pantalón eran los zapatos.
The shoes were almost like his pants.
Okay.
Like the color of his pants.
The shoes were darker, but he was wearing the tan. Was that what was he wearing that was tan?
Los zapatos eran un poco más oscuros, pero traía un color así como un café claro. ¿Qué era lo que traía puesto color café claro?
La camisola, chamarro, tipo chamarro, pero hay chaquetas así.
The shirt and what he had, like a jacket and the pants.
Okay, so it was all tan?
Entonces todo lo traía café claro.
Sí.
Yes.
And was he carrying anything?
Y él traía cargando algo.
Una mochila camuflaje verde y una cangurerita verde igual, camuflaje.
Camouflage.
He was carrying a backpack, a camouflage backpack.
Yeah, there you go.
Green, and also a belt bag, like camouflage as well.
A belt bag, what do you mean? Do you mean like a fanny pack? What do you mean by belt bag?
Cuando dice una bolsa, una cangurerita, es como...
Una bolsita así pues que se la puede amarrar en la cintura y la mochila.
Just a small bag, something that he can put around his waist, and the backpack.
Okay. And did you say, I just want to clarify what color you said the backpack and the bag you described, the small bag you described.
Nomás quiero aclarar, ¿de qué color dijo usted que eran la mochila y la bolsita que tenía?
Verde camuflaje.
Green camouflage?
Green camouflage.
A couple more questions, then we're going to take a break for lunch.
Oh, then we're going to have a lunch break. Oh, it's going to be all day hearing.
Were you able to tell what kind of weapon you were being shot at with?
¿Usted tuvo la oportunidad de ver qué tipo de arma era con la que le estaban disparando?
Nomás no miré qué arma era, pero por los sonidos sí.
No, I wasn't able to see what kind of weapon it was, just the sounds.
And what could you tell from the sound, if anything?
¿Y qué me puede decir, si es que me puede decir algo sobre los ruidos?
Pues se escuchaban de cuerno de chivo de AK-47.
They sounded like an AK-47.
And did you, I just wanted to clarify a little bit. You said that you ran away from the area. Where did you run to? I know you were heading long-term to the border, but where's the first place you were running to?
Muy bien, necesito aclarar algo. Usted, después de esto, salió corriendo. ¿A dónde se dirigía? Bueno, sé que quería llegar a la frontera, pero ¿qué fue el primer lugar a donde usted llegó?
Ahí al muro porque llegó un carro de lado americano.
There to the wall because there was a car got there on the U.S. side.
So you saw a car on the U.S. side when you got to the border?
Cuando usted llegó al muro ahí a la frontera, ¿usted vio que llegó un carro del lado americano? Yes.
What I'm asking you about is the terrain. When you ran from the location of the body, what part of the terrain did you run to? Were you running toward some kind of cover at that point?
Más bien me refiero a cómo está el terreno. Cuando usted empezó a correr de donde estaba el cuerpo y usted empezó a correr, ¿cómo era el terreno ahí donde estaba? ¿Usted se fue corrió a cubrirse con algo?
En un barranco, arroyo.
It was a wash.
And did I hear the word arroyo? That the translation for arroyo is wash?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, last question, and...
That's all I had, Your Honor, for this.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I have a few more, but I'll ask them after lunch.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a lunch break, and we'll reconvene. It's 12:15. We'll reconvene at 1:45.
12:15 to 1:45? Oh. It's an hour and a half lunch. Good Lord. All right. Well, that's the end of that for that one. So what we'll probably do is just take a break and come on back when they come back. But my goodness, an hour and a half? You can't eat in like 30 minutes? Eat in 45 minutes, man. Cram it in there. Just cram the food in and come back. Good Lord. Oh, gosh. Well, it'll give them time to brief. And, of course, it will be good for the defense because they will have the opportunity now to prepare their line of questioning. And we'll come back. We'll just come back and hit it up again. Yeah, so An hour and 45 minutes. All right. Well, I guess we'll have to just leave it there, my friends. We'll come back and we'll pick it back up at about 1:45 when they come back, and we'll see what they have for us. So, all right, everybody. Well, we'll leave it there. We'll cut us off on YouTube and the other platforms, and then we'll say our short break goodbyes before we come back. We'll be back here in about an hour and a half, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Until then, my friends, make it a beautiful day. Locals and Telegram, hang tight. We're going to be right over to you guys in a short second. Everybody else, see you back here in a few hours. Make it a great lunch. Enjoy.